One Piece. Straw Hat Vice Captain Grandpa Garp. Chapter 61. Marineford, Marine Headquarters, Fleet Admiral's Office. The air was as heavy as lead, with only the giant surveillance Den Den Mushi screen on the wall flashing a blinding red light, silently broadcasting a hellish scene, the ruins of the G-14 branch fortress. Burning steel skeletons, flowing magma pits, charred debris everywhere, and a giant, bottomless scorched crater, as if smashed by a god's hammer, everything was shrouded in a dead silence of gunpowder smoke. Kaido. Akainu Sakazuki's voice was like rolling lava, deep and suppressed, yet containing a fury capable of incinerating everything. He stood before the screen, his lava-infused right fist clenched, dark red magma uncontrollably dripping onto the carpet with a sizzling sound, burning out charred holes. His gaze was fixed on the lingering image of the coiling azure giant dragon on the screen, as if he wanted to drag it from the void and crush it. He actually dared to dismantle a marine fortress like a toy. Kizaru Borsellino leaned against the window, fiddling with a golden coin between his fingers, the coin flipping and reflecting a cold light. He pushed up his amber sunglasses, a hint of amusement in his eyes behind the lenses, his tone still lazy. Oh my tilde how scary tilde Kaido-san's destructive power when he's drunk is even more exaggerated than a buster called tilde the repair costs this time, will probably be astronomical tilde. Repair costs. Akainu spun around abruptly, his lava-like pupils almost spewing fire. He pointed at the ruins on the screen, his voice suddenly rising, thundering through the office like a clap of thunder. This isn't about money. This is a complete trampling of the marine, of the world government, and of absolute justice. He took a step forward, the scorching heat causing Kizaru to instinctively shift aside. Kaido must die, the beast's pirates must be completely erased from this world, right here in Marineford. In this war. He abruptly looked at Fleet Admiral Sengoku, who remained silent behind his desk. Fleet Admiral Sengoku, we can't hesitate any longer. Immediately activate the highest level of war mobilization, summon all Shichibukai, and gather all available forces. This time, it's not an encirclement. It's annihilation. Kaido and his beast's pirates will come, but they won't leave. We will wash away the shame of G-14 with their blood. And restore the unshakable prestige of the Marine. Fleet Admiral Sengoku sat in his large admiral's chair, his hands clasped, supporting his chin, shadows shrouding his wrinkled face. He silently watched the ruins on the screen, as if gnawed by a giant beast, his eyes deep, revealing no emotion. The prayer beads slowly turned between his fingers, making a faint rubbing sound. Akainu's roar and Kizaru's teasing seemed unable to break the silence around him. After a long while, he slowly raised his head, his gaze sweeping over Akainu's face, twisted with rage, then over Kizaru's nonchalant expression, finally returning to the silent scorched earth on the screen. His voice was deep and hoarse, carrying an undeniable resolve and a hint of deep-seated weariness. Sakazuki is right. Kaido has gone mad. This time, either he dies. Sengoku suddenly clenched his fist, the prayer beads creaking under the pressure, and an unprecedented sharp light burst from his eyes, like a drawn sword. Or the Marine perishes. Orders. First, immediately activate the final phase of the Godslayer project. All Seastone deployments in position. Fortress defense systems at full power. Second, summon all 7 warlords of the sea. Proceed to Marineford immediately. Tell them. Sengoku's voice was like ice, each word striking hard. This is an order, not a request. Those who do not come, will be considered traitors. And dealt with after the war. Third, blockade all sea routes to Marineford. All officers on leave immediately report back. All elite branch forces to converge on headquarters. This time, Sengoku slowly rose to his feet, his tall figure, set against the backdrop of the ruins on the screen, resembled an ancient war god about to embark on a desperate campaign, exuding a tragic, do-or-die aura. The Marine will spare no effort to completely bury Beast Kaido in Marineford. New world, turbulent seas. A massive warship, flying the Beast's pirate's flag and shaped like the grotesque skeleton of a giant beast, cut through the waves at full speed. Its figurehead was a roaring mammoth skull. Big Brother King. Governor Kaido's dragon roar signal. A communication officer, covered in black feathers like a crow, flapped his wings and landed beside a tall figure at the bow of the ship. King, one of the beast's pirates all-stars, the conflagration. He wore a large black feathered cloak, a metal faceguard, and a horned helmet, like a demon returned from hell. He stood at the bow with his arms crossed, his crimson eyes peering through his goggles towards Marineford, his gaze cold and fanatical. The governor's wrath has been ignited. King's voice was deep and hoarse, like metal grinding. The Marine dared to touch his reverse scale. Order all fleets to advance at full speed. Target, Marineford. Let the Marines, Justice, Fortress, turn to ashes under the beast's fury. Roar. On board, countless fierce gifters let out earth-shattering roars. In another sea area, on a giant ship resembling a floating island. Queen, the plague. His massive body was sunken into a soft sofa, one hand gripping a giant fried chicken leg, the other holding a den mushi, spittle flying. Minions. Did you hear the governor's roar? Those marine idiots stirred up a hornet's nest. All of you, perk up. Bring all the newly developed, ice oni, and, mummy. This time at Marineford, we're throwing a grand plague party. Wahahaha. Further out on the sea, a black sailing ship, silent as a ghost. Jack, the drought. He stood at the bow, silent as an iron tower. His massive body was covered in thick fur, tusks exposed, eyes as ferocious as a wild beast's. He needed no words, merely slowly drew the two giant scimitars from his back, which were like door panels. The blades scraped against the scabbards, emitting a harsh clanging sound, like the whetstone of death. His crew members behind him, feeling the chilling killing intent, were all silent with fear, yet their eyes burned with bloodthirsty excitement. The beast's pirates, this terrifying behemoth entrenched in the New World, had fully bared its fangs at Kaido's roaring summons. Countless warships, flying the beast's skull flag, like sharks smelling blood, converged from all corners of the New World into a destructive torrent, heading full speed towards a single target, Marine Headquarters, Marineford. Killing intent surged, obscuring the sky. Dressrosa, King's Plateau. Doflamingo sat in a huge armchair, legs crossed, holding the latest newspaper. The front page featured a photo of the G14 fortress ruins and a silhouette of Kaido roaring in his dragon form. His mouth curved into an exaggerated, playful arc, letting out his characteristic laugh. Foo 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 foo. Interesting. Too interesting. The Marine played with fire and burned themselves. Kaido, that mad dragon, has completely gone berserk. Marineford War. Foo foo foo, a million times more exciting than a bullfighting arena. He casually tossed the newspaper aside and said to Trable, who stood by, tell the Marine, the Shichibukai, Heavenly Yaksha, will arrive on time. How can I miss this great show? Amazon Lily, Empress Palace. Hancock leaned against the throne, looking at the mandatory summons from the Marine in her hand, her exquisite face covered in frost. HMPH, lowly Marine, daring to command me. Making such a big fuss over Kaido's daughter, foolish. She casually threw the summons to the ground and crushed it with her high heel. However, that old man Garp seems to be going too. Foo foo foo. A barely perceptible blush suddenly appeared on her face, then she quickly regained her haughty demeanor. Fine. All reluctantly, go watch the show. Karaigana Island, gloomy ancient castle. Hawkeye Mahawk slowly wiped his black blade. Yuru. A marine summons lay before him as well. He looked up, his sharp hawk eyes gazing at the rolling dark clouds outside the window, his voice calm and even. War, another meaningless slaughter. He put down the cloth and slowly slid the black blade into its scabbard on his back. However, perhaps I'll encounter an opponent worthy of a slash. He rose and walked towards the small coffin boat docked outside the door. Holy Land Mary Geois, deep within Pangaea Castle. The Gorosei sat around the Void Century throne, a huge screen divided into several views, Marineford's tense preparations, an aerial view of the beast's pirates' fleet gathering, and a close-up of the Sunny breaking through waves, speeding towards Marineford. In the image, Garp stood at the bow, his short gray hair wild in the sea breeze, a cold, mocking sneer on his lips. Garp, the Gorosei with curly hair said with a sinister look, that traitor, he went after all. Good. The Gorosei with the sword caressed his sword hilt, a cold glint in his eyes, together with Kaido, and that restless straw hat, bury them all. Let fear, the bald Gorosei's voice was icy, become the best nourishment for the new order. Across the world, in countless taverns, squares, and homes, before projection screens, crowds were silent. News Coup flapped its wings, scattering the latest extra additions to the world. Earth-shattering change. Beast Kaido destroys G-14. New Marineford war on the brink. Marine all out. Shichibukai mandatory conscription. Objective. Bury the beasts at Marineford. Straw Hat Luffy and Trader Garp rapidly approaching. Whitebeard pirates movements unknown. Marine. Kaido. Is this the end of the world? In a tavern, someone asked with a trembling voice. Fight. Better they all die together. A pirate with a scarred face gulped down some liquor and sneered. Mr. Garp, is he really going to completely break with the Marine? An old man in a small East Blue village looked at Garp's profile in the newspaper, tears streaming down his face. Straw Hat, he always stirs up trouble. The bar owner on Sabayati Archipelago wiped a glass, shaking his head with a bitter smile. Fear, excitement, worry, indifference, countless emotions spread across the world. Everyone knew that a superstorm, capable of overturning the balance of the seas and sweeping across the entire world, was about to erupt, in Marineford. Marineford, this magnificent fortress symbolizing the absolute justice of the Marine, now lay like a steel behemoth, thoroughly enraged and with every muscle taut, crouching within the Azure Bay, exuding a suffocating atmosphere of grim determination. Warships lined the port and the surrounding waters, dense white sails and seagull flags almost obscured the sea surface. Countless soldiers, like ants, nervously moved and deployed defenses throughout the fortress. The clash of metal, the roar of engines, and the shouts of officers wove together into an overture of war. The air was thick with the smell of gunpowder, steel, and a catalyst called fear. Warships of various designs, flying the specially authorized flags of the world government, sailed successively into the grim bay, converging from all directions like hyenas that had smelled blood. Fufufufufu. This excitement is truly thrilling. Doflamingo, strutting with his arrogant outward splayed gait, was the first to step onto the port of Marineford. Wearing his pink feather coat, the corners of his mouth under his sunglasses stretched back to his ears. He looked without reservation at the nervously deployed Marine soldiers around him, letting out a grating laugh. The Marine is betting their entire fortune this time. It looks like Kaido really scared the guts out of you, huh? Shut up, Doflamingo. A Marine vice admiral responsible for receiving them had a livid face, suppressing his fury. The fleet admiral is waiting for you in the conference room. HMPH. These lowly Marines actually made this mistress step foot in such a filthy place. Hancock's high heels tapped crisply on the stone road. She slightly raised her chin, her stunning face filled with undisguised disgust and arrogance, as if the surrounding air had thinned because of her presence. She couldn't even be bothered to glance at the vice admiral. If it weren't for HMPH. War is always so noisy. Hawkeye Mahawk walked alone, holding the supreme grade blade, Yuru, like a silent mountain. His gaze was as sharp as an eagle's, sweeping over the fortress's tight defenses and the distant horizon, seemingly assessing something, completely ignoring the surrounding noise and tension. Bartholomew Kuma stood silently not far away, his massive body like a wall. He held a Bible in his hands, his eyes vacant, devoid of any emotional fluctuation, resembling a machine awaiting instruction. Inside the conference room, the atmosphere was even heavier than outside. Around the massive circular table, the Shichibukai were either sitting or standing, each with a different demeanor. In the main seat, Fleet Admiral Sengoku had his hands crossed under his chin, his face so gloomy it seemed water could drip from it. Akainu stood behind him, arms crossed, his gaze sweeping over every Shichibukai present, his eyes openly showing coldness and distrust. Fu. So, you called us here urgently just to be the Marines' guard dogs. Doflamingo was sitting with one leg crossed over the other, his foot swinging, his tone full of provocation. You need such a grand formation just to deal with a drunken Kaido. Fleet Admiral Sengoku, are you getting old and timid? Watch your words, Doflamingo. Akainu's voice rumbled like rolling lava, carrying a scorching threat. The title of Shichibukai is not your protective charm. Oh. How scary tilde. Kizaru Borsellino was leaning against the door frame, tilting his head, his brown sunglasses reflecting the light. However, Sakazuki, they are currently precious, Combat power tilde even if they aren't very obedient tilde. Sengoku slammed the table, interrupting the rising tension. Silence. His sharp gaze swept over everyone present, his voice low and full of pressure. I didn't call you here to listen to you argue. You are well aware of Kaido's madness and strength. This war concerns the survival of the Marine and the stability of the world order. If anyone dares to pretend to obey while secretly defying orders, or holds back their strength. Sengoku's eyes suddenly turned icy cold. After the war, the Marine will settle accounts with them first. He stood up and pointed to the massive Marineford defense map behind him. Your mission is not to clash head-on with Kaido. That is the job of the Marine Admirals and the Science Division. His finger tapped several key defensive nodes at the harbor entrance. Doflamingo, your string fruit ability is responsible for blockading the harbor entrance and impeding the charging speed of the Beast's pirates fleet. Fu. You want me to block cannonballs? What a waste of talent. Hancock. Your Marrow Mellow and Perfume Femur are responsible for clearing out the gifters who break through the defenses and attempt to land. HMPH. Do mere riffraff deserve this mistress to make a move? Mahawk. Free movement. Seek an opportunity to cut off the wings of Wildfire, King. Or any target you deem worthy of your blade. Hawkeye slightly raised his eyes, counting as a response. Bartholomew Kuma. You will command the Pacifista Corps as a mobile defense force to fill gaps in the battle line. Kuma nodded silently. Remember. Sengoku emphasized finally, his voice like ice. This is not a request, it is an order. Hold your positions. Until Kaido is completely annihilated. The meeting ended, and the Shichibukai left, each with a different expression. Doflamingo wore a playful smile, but his eyes were flickering deep down. Hancock hurried away with a look of disgust, only wanting to find a certain figure as quickly as possible. Kizaru watched their retreating backs and curled his lip. They truly are a troublesome bunch. Fleet Admiral Sengoku, is it really alright to place your bets on them? Sengoku did not reply, his expression only growing gloomier. He walked to the window, watching the ships and elite soldiers from marine branches all over the world continuously pouring into the port below. The shouts of generals, the running footsteps of soldiers, the clatter of moving weapons. The entirety of Marineford was like a furiously operating war machine, sharpening its fangs ever more keenly. How are things on the Science Division's side? Sengoku asked in a deep voice. All of the SSG Special Operations units have been deployed and are in position. Kizaru replied lazily, we're just waiting to give the Beast's pirates a surprise tomorrow. But speaking of which, Dr. Vegapunk seems to have some reservations about deploying so many of them. Is now the time to worry about his opinion. Akainu growled, everything for victory. All power must be committed. Just then, a messenger rushed in. Report, Fleet Admiral. The CP-0 special envoys have arrived. Sengoku and Akainu exchanged glances, an imperceptible cold light flashing in their eyes. 3 CP-0 members, wearing white masks and pure white suits, appeared silently at the conference room door like ghosts. The leader bowed slightly, his voice smooth and cold, devoid of emotion. By order of the Gorosei-sama, we are specifically here to assist the Marine and ensure the God-slaying project is foolproof. If necessary, we will directly intervene in the battle. Sengoku's fist clenched slightly beneath the table, but his face remained impassive. Gorosei-sama is too kind to worry. Welcome, everyone. The arrival of CP-0 was like adding an icy feather to a bowstring already stretched to its limit. Surveillance. Or genuine support? A question mark formed in everyone's hearts. Night fell slowly. Yet Marineford was brightly lit, like daytime. Searchlight beams pierced the night sky like sharp swords, sweeping back and forth across the sea surface. Every corner of the fortress was filled with soldiers, their weapons polished bright, aimed at the dark waters. A deathly silence, signaling the coming storm, enveloped the entire fortress. Only the sound of waves hitting the seawall, rhythmic enough to cause unease, could be heard. Countless eyes across the world were fixedly staring at the sea area, illuminated like a stage by the lights, projected via Mushi. Bars were silent, crowds in the squares held their breath, and even the reclusive nobles nervously followed the developments. The Great War is tomorrow. People whispered, their voices filled with fear, anticipation, and anxiety. Between the distant void century throne, the Gorosei quietly watched the screen displaying Marineford preparing for battle. The pieces are all in position. The stage has been set. We just wait for the actors to appear. Meanwhile, in the deeper, darker waters far away, a massive warship, resembling a white whale, silently cut through the waves, steadily sailing toward Marineford. The person whose whereabouts the Marine had been unable to trace had appeared here. Besides Kaido and Garp, someone else was going to intervene. At the bow, a giant-like figure leaned on his bisanto, gazing into the distance, his white mustache fluttering in the sea breeze. Garararara. Sengoku, you better be ready for the surprise I'm bringing this time. The storm was about to break. The darkness before dawn, thick as ink, pressed heavily upon Marineford Bay. The fortress's searchlight beams, like giant gods' sharp swords, frantically cut through the pitch-black sea, tearing the surging waves into fragmented light and shadow. The air was filled with the salty smell of the sea, the coldness of steel, and a suffocating, deadly silence, like a bowstring stretched to its limit. Hundreds of thousands of marine soldiers stood like a silent steel forest in every corner of the fortress, their guns and cannons menacing, their gazes fixed on the dark sea ahead. Sweat silently dripped onto the cold deck or rocks, making a faint but thunderous, pat-pat, sound. Below the execution platform, at the forefront of the harbor plaza, 3 specially made high-backed chairs stood like 3 insurmountable mountains before all the soldiers. Their backs were tall, their bodies heavy, exuding a cold metallic luster. Akainu Sakazuki sat in the center, arms crossed, dark red magma slowly flowing and surging like a living thing on his exposed right arm, emitting a scorching heat that seemed to incinerate everything. He kept his eyes closed, his brows tightly furrowed, as if suppressing an erupting volcano, every pore exuding a destructive aura. Pirate blood, his deep voice was like rolling lava, carrying an unquestionable tone of judgment, should be completely spilled. Aokiji Kuzan leaned against the chair on the left, resting his chin on one hand, eyes closed, seemingly lost in sleep. But the extreme coldness emanating from him caused tiny ice crystals to condense in the air. That unconsciously emitted chill made the soldiers near him shiver uncontrollably. Kizaru Borsellino sat on the right chair with his legs crossed, holding a small golden nail clipper, leisurely trimming his nails. His brown sunglasses reflected the cold light of the searchlights, obscuring his gaze. My salary isn't enough to fight the 4 emperors. His lazy voice carried its usual playful tone, and the golden light at his fingertips flickered slightly with the movement of the nail clipper. How terrifying. Above the execution platform, Sengoku the Buddha stood facing the wind, draped in his massive, justice, cloak. The cloak flapped loudly in the biting sea wind, the huge characters, justice, embroidered on it twisting and rolling violently in the gale, as if struggling in this murderous atmosphere. His face was grim as iron, as he surveyed the battle-ready steel torrent below and the silent sea ahead. His voice, amplified by a den mushi, echoed throughout the fortress, deep and oppressive. Justice cannot be defiled. Today, Marineford will be the burial ground for all pirates. An indescribable, terrifying pressure, as if from ancient primordial times, suddenly crushed down from the sky like an invisible tsunami. The air instantly became thick and heavy. The fortress lights flickered violently, and countless soldiers groaned, as if struck in the chest by an invisible giant hammer, their faces instantly turning pale. They're here. The roar from the watchtower was distorted. Everyone's gaze suddenly shot towards the sky. Above the dark sky, torn apart by the searchlight beams, thick clouds were violently ripped open as if by an invisible giant hand. A colossal azure dragon shadow, large enough to obscure half the sky, enveloped in an aura of destruction, descended like a falling star. Roar ow 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 ow. The deafening dragon's roar was like a doomsday horn. The azure giant dragon coiled in the clouds, its massive dragon head lowered, its bloodshot golden vertical pupils like burning blood moons, locked onto the area below. Sengoku, Akainu. Kaido's voice was like rolling thunder, filled with monstrous rage, give me back my son. As he roared, behind him on the horizon, the darkness was torn open like a curtain. Countless massive warships, flying the beast's pirate's skull flag, emerged from the waves like a shark pack smelling blood, appearing with murderous intent. On the three leading giant ships, King the Conflagration's flames surged, Queen the Plague cackled incessantly, and Jack the Drought was silent as a mountain. Fire! From the fortress command tower, a roar erupted again. The steel behemoths awoke. A storm of deadly metal poured frantically towards the giant dragon in the sky and the fleet on the sea. Boro breath. Kaido's dragon mouth opened wide in fury, and a destructive beam of light furiously erupted. Dark dog. Akainu suddenly opened his eyes, and his magma giant fist surged upwards against the sky. Boom. The sky shattered and the earth cracked. Dragon's breath and magma collided head-on in midair. The light was blinding. Shockwaves raged. My subordinates. Charge. Kaido roared. The beast's pirates' fleet charged frantically towards the harbor, enduring the cannon fire. Just at this critical moment. Whoosh. A deep, powerful horn sound, carrying supreme majesty, pierced through the cannon fire, coming from the other side of the horizon. Everyone's gaze, filled with unbelievable shock, suddenly turned. The sea fog was parted by an invisible giant hand. The Moby Dick, like a white giant whale, emerged from the mist. At the bow, Whitebeard Edward Newgate stood proudly, leaning on his bisinto. His white crescent mustache fluttered, and his golden eyes were like a sleeping lion. Garararara. It's really lively. Whitebeard's hearty laughter drowned out the clamor. His gaze swept over the giant dragon and the fortress, finally settling on Sengoku. Sengoku. Decades no see, you old geezer, still love making such a grand spectacle. The battlefield instantly fell silent, and the beast's charge halted. Whitebeard. Kaido's dragon head spun sharply, his vertical pupils filled with ferocity. You old geezer, what are you doing here? Garararara. Kaido. Whitebeard struck his bisinto to the ground, his voice shaking all directions. I'm here to settle an old score. His gaze swept over the unconscious Yamato on the execution platform. This word exploded like a bomb. Sengoku's face was ashen. Akainu's magma boiled. Aokiji opened his ice-blue eyes. Kizaru's nail-clipping motion paused. HMPH. Who cares how many 4 emperors there are? Akainu's magma giant fist pointed directly at Whitebeard. It's good that you're here, it saves me the trouble of finding you one by one. Today, I'll bury all of you right here in Marineford. A sudden, vibrant, strange cry broke the silence. A warship with a giant sun symbol embedded in its bow, the Sunny, burst out like an arrow from a bowstring, charging forcefully through the gap between the beasts and marine fleets. The Straw Hat's skull flag flapped vigorously. At the bow, Straw Hat Luffy pressed his straw hat, his rubber body excitedly expanding, his eyes shining. So many people, so lively. Kaido. Whitebeard. Garp, shirtless with his gray-white short hair standing on end, stood beside Luffy. He folded his arms, looking at the giant dragon in the sky and the giant white whale ship, a crude, mocking sneer on his lips. Sengoku, Akainu. Your marine's reputation is really something. Even 4 emperors came to cheer you on. He suddenly stepped forward, his voice like thunder, echoing throughout the bay, his gaze like lightning, piercing directly at the 3 figures below the execution platform. 3 brats acting as door gods. Sitting so high, aren't you afraid of breaking your legs? Sengoku. The grudge for capturing Ace, it's time to settle it today. Garp clenched his fists, his knuckles cracking loudly. I'm going to tear this place down. Mr. Garp. Aokiji's ice-blue eyes gazed at him, his voice carrying a hint of complex sigh. Must it really come to this? How terrifying tilde. Golden light gathered at Kizaru's fingertips, his tone still lazy, but the look behind his lenses sharpened a bit. Garp didn't even bother to answer. He suddenly raised his hand, casually grabbing at the air. Whoosh! A huge cannonball whistling towards the Sunny was actually caught in his hand from a distance. As if he were holding a toy. Bullshit justice. Garp sneered, then suddenly exerted force with his 5 fingers. He threw it away with a wave of his hand. The cannonball exploded shortly after being thrown, and several hot fragments even hissed as they grazed Kizaru's perfectly tailored yellow suit, leaving several scorched marks. Kizaru. He looked down at the scorch marks on his suit, and the corner of his mouth twitched slightly. Since all the audience members have arrived, Garp's voice suddenly rose, like a doomsday horn. Then it's time to properly settle this score. Before his words finished, Garp clenched his right fist and, without any fancy moves, threw a punch at a marine warship attempting to ambush the Sunny at the harbor entrance. Ohm! An invisible fist pressure, condensed to the extreme and accompanied by high-frequency spatial shockwaves, slammed out like a world-destroying hammer. Bang! That massive warship was hit head-on as if by an invisible giant's hammer. Its hull instantly twisted, collapsed, and then exploded with a roar. Wood splinters flew everywhere. The immense impact even overturned two smaller vessels nearby. Ding! Detected host's guardian will in extreme rage. Emotional core has broken through 70%. Skill, serious stomp, upgraded. Spatial shockwave range increased by 200%. This punch was like lighting the final fuse. Fire! Annihilate all pirates. Sengoku's furious roar echoed through the sky. The Gorosei's command was like a death warrant. For justice. Akainu's magma giant fist once again blasted towards Kaido in the sky. Kill. The beast's pirates fleet, led by King, launched another desperate charge. Garararara. Then let's make a big ruckus. Whitebeard swung his Bisanto. The Moby Dick's cannons opened fire completely. The power of the tremor fruit began to tear space apart. Gum gum, giant rocket. Luffy excitedly stretched his arms. Luffy, follow Grandpa and beat up the Marines. Garp's wild laughter was exceptionally clear amidst the cannon fire. Marineford. This magnificent fortress, bearing the absolute justice of the Marine, at this moment, completely transformed into a war furnace that devoured everything. Cannon fire filled the sky. Battle cries shook the ground. Magma and dragon's breath collided. Sword energy and poisonous gas intertwined. Giant waves and flames danced together. 4 emperors. Marine. Traitor. Shichibukai. All forces. All grudges. All ambitions. In this sea stained with blood and fire, they clashed with a roar. The seawater in the Marineford harbor was stained various shades of red, and broken ship planks and floating corpses bobbed with the waves. The air was mixed with the smell of gunpowder and blood, and the deafening sound of cannon fire was interspersed with the wails of the wounded. The Marine fleet formed a steel defense line, their cannon muzzles continuously spitting flames, attempting to block the pirates' assault. Suddenly, the sky darkened. A massive shadow swept across the battlefield, its wings spreading out to blot out the sun. King transformed into a pteranodon, dark red flames flowing between his wings, like lava surging across a volcano's surface. Marines, feel the wrath of the Lunarian race. He roared, violently flapping his wings. Hundreds of fireballs descended like meteors, heading straight for the Marine fleet. These fireballs were not ordinary flames, but the sacred fire unique to the Lunarian race, possessing extremely high temperatures capable of melting through steel. Fire Dragon Emperor. Before the fireballs arrived, the scorching heatwave already stung the skin of the Marine soldiers. The mast of a battleship in the front row instantly carbonized, and its sails turned to ash. Evacuate quickly. A Marine rear admiral shouted hoarsely, but it was too late. Just at this critical moment, a blue flame shot up into the sky, unfolding into a massive barrier midair. Marco transformed into the Phoenix, scattering his flames of regeneration from his wings, forcefully blocking King's lethal blow. The blue and red flames collided, erupting in a deafening roar. The shockwave pressed a huge depression into the sea surface, and several small warships were instantly flipped over. King Marco hovered, flapping his wings, his voice calm. If you're going to burn things, burn the gun batteries. Don't waste your energy on these ships. A flicker of displeasure crossed King's dragon eyes. Marco, what gives you the right to command me? Because I don't want to see your flames wasted for nothing. Marco deflected another wave of fireballs. The fortress gun batteries are the biggest threat. The Marine fortress gun batteries were adjusting their angles, their thick muzzles clearly preparing for the next volley. Just then, a figure leapt up from the sea surface. Garp stepped on the scattered wood chips and sea spray, his marine boots creating air blasts in the void. What are you two brats arguing about? Garp roared impatiently, swinging his right fist. There were no fancy light effects, only a shockwave formed by pure power compressing the air. Bang! 3 fireballs that were about to fall toward the Whitebeard pirate's main ship shattered instantly, dissolving into scattered sparks. If you wanted to burn the batteries, say so earlier. Garp landed on the Moby Dick's mast, scratching his ear, wasting this old man's time eating senbei. King's dragon face clearly twitched. As a lead performer of the Beast's pirates, when had he ever been treated with such contempt? But the strength displayed by the old man's punch just now forced him to be wary. Garp. King's voice was low, you'd better not get in the way. Although he said that, the flames on his wings turned toward the marine fortress gun batteries. The dark red flames condensed into an even larger fireball, and the temperature sharply increased. Marco sighed in relief. Thanks, old man. Cut the flattery. Garp curled his lip. Hurry up and deal with these batteries, this old man still has to go settle the score with Sengoku. On the sea surface below, the marine soldiers watched the sudden turn of events in the sky with terror. They actually teamed up. A young soldier said, trembling. The veteran next to him raised his gun and gritted his teeth, saying, don't get distracted. Fire. Hundreds of cannons from the marine gun batteries were aimed directly at King and Marco. HMPH, petty tricks. King flapped his wings, and the sacred fire formed a shield. The cannonballs had absolutely no effect. Marco skillfully darted between the cannon fire, his blue flames tracing an elegant trajectory. He occasionally swooped down, using his sharp talons to shred the outer armor of the gun batteries. Garp wasn't idle either. He stood on the swaying mast, and whenever stray bullets or cannon fire approached the Whitebeard pirates' ships, he casually punched them into oblivion. Vice Admiral Garp. On a marine battleship, a vice admiral wearing a cloak of justice shouted in disbelief, did you truly betray the Marines? Garp glanced at him, recognizing him as an officer who had trained under him. Betrayal. Garp burst into laughter, this old man is just correcting the Marines' mistakes. With that, he threw a punch. The shockwave wasn't aimed at the battleship, but instead deflected a scorching fireball that was heading toward the ship. King roared in dissatisfaction. Garp. What are you doing? Young man, don't be so hot-headed. Garp pulled out a bag of senbei and actually started eating them. That ship has some of my old subordinates on it. Give me some face. This action caused a moment of eerie silence across the battlefield. Soldiers on both sides stared dumbfounded at the old man leisurely eating senbei amidst the hail of bullets and cannon fire. Just then, the largest main cannon of the marine fortress finally finished charging. The muzzle, over 10 meters in diameter, was concentrating heart-stopping energy, aimed precisely at the Moby Dick, where Whitebeard was located. Oh no! Marco cried out, wanting to rush back to defend, but he was blocked by King's flames. King also noticed the danger, but he was currently being pinned down by the firepower of 3 warships. Whitebeard slowly stood up, Murakumogiri in hand, seemingly ready to take action himself. But someone was faster than him. Too loud. Garp swallowed the last bite of senbei, tossing the paper bag aside. He leapt down from the mast, not landing on the ship, but walking directly on air, each step creating ripples in the atmosphere. Just as the main cannon was about to fire, Garp appeared directly in front of the muzzle. Compared to the massive cannon barrel, his figure seemed so tiny. Such a huge gun battery, an eyesore. He pulled his right fist back and delivered a simple, direct straight punch. There was no dazzling light, no overwhelming momentum, only the collision of a fist and steel. Crack. First, a crack appeared on the cannon barrel, and then the crack rapidly spread across the entire gun battery. Finally, amidst a grating sound of twisting metal, the Marine's most powerful fortress main cannon was pulverized into scrap iron by a single punch. Fragments scattered everywhere. Garp landed firmly and dusted his hands. It's quiet now. The entire battlefield fell silent once again. Both Marines and pirates were stunned by this inhuman strength. King was silent for a moment, a complicated look flashing in his dragon eyes, before he finally spoke, thanks, old man. Garp grinned, if you're going to thank me for not wasting my senbei time. Marco landed beside Garp, his blue flames flickering slightly. What's next, old man? Garp looked toward the execution platform, his gaze turning sharp. Of course, we're going to go tear down that old fool Sengoku's crappy platform. Just then, a huge roar came from the harbor entrance. The Beast's pirates' main fleet finally broke through the defense line. Queen's mechanical voice echoed across the battlefield via a loudspeaker. Lord Kaido. We have arrived. That brat Jack has already gone to dismantle the flank gun batteries. Kaido, in his Azure Dragon form, responded with a long roar from the clouds, his dragon cry shaking heaven and earth. Whitebeard burst into laughter. Garararara. Looks like everyone's here. Boys. Let the Marines see what we can do. Garp twisted his neck, his knuckles cracking loudly. Finally, time to stretch my muscles. 3 forces, 1 unified goal, Marine Headquarters, Marineford. The war has only just begun. The battle situation beneath the left-wing wall of Marineford had descended into madness. Queen, in his massive Brachiosaurus form, rampaged through the smoke and dust, his mechanical tail sweeping 5 or 6 Marine soldiers away like bowling pins. Boring. This is too boring. Queen's electronic voice was full of irritation. Is this all the Marines are capable of? The armor on his back suddenly opened, and several nozzles extended. Then let's have an ice oni party. The feast begins. PSSH. Purple poisonous fog erupted like a snake leaving its hole, instantly covering the blind spot beneath the wall. 3 members of the Beast's pirates' gifters who couldn't dodge were enveloped by the mist. Their skin instantly became covered in frost, their eyes rolled back, and they actually plunged their claws into the chests of their comrades beside them. Lord Queen. There are allies. A rhino ability user roared in despair, only to be headbutted off the wall by his frozen comrade the next second. Does art distinguish between friend and foe? Queen's electronic voice was flat. His laser sight aimed at the chaotic crowd. Next round. Before he could finish speaking, a figure wreathed in blue flames cut through the air and arrived. Diable Hambi. Sanji's leather shoe struck Queen's jaw like a branding iron. A grating sound of fracturing metal and flesh erupted from the point of contact. Clang. The alloy jaw deformed and cracked, sending sparks flying. Low-class cook. How dare you? Queen's mechanical neck reared up like a furious python, hydraulic pipes hissing. Brachiosaurus snake mode. Activate. The steel spine extended joint by joint, and the poison gland nozzles aimed at Sanji. I'll teach you what it means to. Too slow. Scarlet sword light tore through the smoke screen. Zoro burst into the battle circle, his 3-sword style cutting open the toxic mist. Onigiri. The blade fiercely embedded itself into the mechanical scales. Just as the fierce battle was in full swing, a thunderous roar came from the top of the wall. Giraffe fatty. Go poison somewhere far away. A senbei paper bag slapped onto Queen's electronic eye like a projectile. What is this thing? Queen's processor stalled instantly. Garp stomped his right foot on the ground. Boom. The city wall shook violently, and shattered stones sprayed out like a rainstorm. 3 sharp stones accurately struck the joints of the nozzles on Queen's back. Ah! Queen staggered, and the jet of venom immediately lost control. A cold light flashed in Sanji's eyes. Thanks, old man. Premier Hachi's 17 scarlet leg shadows slammed into the unbalanced launch platform like a pile driver. The nozzle was forcefully twisted by the immense power. PSSH. PSSH. The compressed poison bomb traced a strange arc, plummeting straight toward the Marine left-wing position. Enemy attack. Poison bomb incoming. A Marine rear admiral warned hoarsely. It was already too late. The poison bomb struck the ground and exploded. The purple poisonous fog instantly swallowed half of the formation. Amidst the choking sounds, a middle-aged vice admiral's skin began to frost over. He roared, "Queen, you mad dog. Left wing requesting support. Repeat, left wing requesting support." The communications soldier screamed into the Den Den Mushi, Queen's poison gas bomb mistakenly hit our position. Inside the Marine Command Tower, Sengoku slammed his fist onto the control panel. That idiot. Should we dispatch a medical team? An anxious staff officer asked. It's too late, Sengoku said, his face ashen. Have Aokiji contain the gas spread, and have the other units retreat 200 meters. Beneath the wall, Queen's electronic eyes flashed frantically. Data. Excellent experimental data. He completely disregarded the friendly fire, turning his nozzles to aim at the retreating Marine Science Division. Vegapunk's running dogs. Take this special edition from me. Lord Queen. No. A Beast's Pirates squad leader shouted in terror, "There are still some of ours over there." Before he finished speaking, the venom had already been sprayed. Just at this critical moment, a streak of blue flame swept across the battlefield. Phoenix brand. Marco kicked the trajectory of the venom aside. The venom flew past the heads of the science division and landed on an empty patch of ground. Queen, Marco said coldly, have you gone mad enough? Queen's electronic eyes flashed. Phoenix. Meddling busybody. At this moment, the Sunny had just broken through the right-wing defense line and approached the left-wing battlefield. What's happening over there? Luffy stretched his neck to look around. What thick purple smoke? Nami quickly checked the sea chart. It's Queen's poison gas. But it looks like he hit his own people. What an idiot, Zoro said, sheathing his sword. He can't even tell friend from foe. Sanji lit his cigarette. That idiot actually helped us a lot. Garp stood by the ship's rail, crushing the senbei in his hand. Fighting poison with poison saves trouble. On the battlefield below, a blood-stained straw hat remnant flag was burning in the toxic ruins. The Marine left-wing position was in chaos. Poisoned soldiers writhed in pain, and medical personnel risked danger to rescue them at the edges. Quick! Carry the poisoned ones over here. A Marine medical captain commanded the soldiers. Be careful not to let it touch your skin directly. Sir. Antidote reserves are insufficient. There's no time. The medical captain looked pale as he saw more and more soldiers falling. Rinse them with water first. Save whoever you can. Meanwhile, the Beast's pirates also suffered heavy losses. Lord Queen. Please stop attacking. A messenger risked approaching Queen. We have already lost 3 squads. Queen swept his mechanical tail, sending the messenger flying. Get lost. Don't interrupt my art. Jack rushed over from the right-wing battlefield and roared when he saw the scene. Queen. Are you insane? Shut up, Jack. Queen's electronic voice was full of fanaticism. This is perfect experimental data. On the Sunny, Chopper anxiously observed the battlefield situation. Many people have been poisoned, they need immediate treatment. But it's too dangerous to go now, Jinbei steered steadily. Queen is completely out of control. Let me go. Chopper put on his medical bag. I'm a doctor. Robin held Chopper back. Wait, look over there. Aokiji had arrived at the left-wing position and pressed his hands to the ground. Ice Age. Cold air rapidly spread, freezing the poisonous fog in the air, forming eerie purple ice crystals. It's temporarily contained. Aokiji told the medical team, but it will only last for 10 minutes. The medical captain immediately ordered, quick. Rescue the injured while you have the chance. Just then, Queen suddenly changed direction, and the nozzles on his back aimed at the Marines again. Garp frowned and leapt down from the Sunny. You just won't quit, will you? He landed in front of Queen like a cannonball, punching the mechanical leg of the Brachiosaurus form. Bang! The heavy armor instantly dented. Old geezer. Queen roared, turning his venom nozzles toward Garp. Garp neither dodged nor avoided, delivering another punch. This time it directly hit the base of the launcher on Queen's back. Crack! Black smoke billowed from the precision instrument. Your toy, Garp said coldly, should be scrapped. Queen's electronic eyes flashed wildly, suddenly emitting a grating mechanical sound as his entire body began to deform and reorganize. Everyone be careful. Marco warned loudly. Queen is getting serious. The battlefield situation became tense once more. Marines, Beasts pirates, Whitebeard pirates, all eyes were focused on the sudden chaos beneath the left-wing wall. The poisonous fog had not completely dispersed, and a new crisis was brewing. The air in the center of Marineford's harbor solidified like lead. Kaido, in his azure dragon form, coiled in the shattered port's sky, each breath exhaling sulfurous smoke thick with the scent of alcohol. The furious flames burning in his dragon eyes seemed poised to ignite the entire fortress. Sengoku. Akainu. Kaido's roar rumbled like thunder, making ripples spread across the sea surface. Give my son back. His dragon maw opened wide, blue-white destructive energy gathering in his throat, but the next moment he violently shook his head, forcefully swallowing back the Boro breath that could have leveled half the fortress. His thick dragon claw reached behind him, pulling out a giant kanabo wrapped in black and red lightning. It was his beloved weapon, Hasaikai. You go Rororo, using that move would be too easy for you all. Kaido let out a drunken, wild laugh, his dragon body spinning fiercely in the air to gather power. Conqueror's haki, almost tangible, wrapped around the kanabo, causing the surrounding space to twist and tremble. All personally, smash your rotten stage. Descending 3 worlds, leading to Naraka. The kanabo tore through the sky, emitting an ear-splitting shriek. Black and red Haoshoku lightning danced on the weapon, like world-ending thunder, striking directly at the execution platform. In front of the execution platform, Akainu Sakazuki stood like a lava sculpture. Magma churned and boiled on his right arm, its high temperature distorting the surrounding air. Great eruption. The giant lava fist slammed out decisively. Crimson magma erupted like a volcano, meeting the deadly strike descending from the sky head-on. The clash of a top-tier Logia ability and Conqueror's haki. Boom. A deafening explosion swept across the entire battlefield. A red and black interwoven shockwave spread spherically, instantly shattering the glass of all buildings within a 100-meter radius. The sea surface was forcefully pressed into a huge depression several hundred meters in diameter by this power. Over a dozen nearby medium-sized warships were thrown into the air, breaking into several pieces before crashing into the sea. Reinforce defenses, all officers hold the line. Fleet Admiral Sengoku roared sternly from the execution platform, his hands glowing with Buddha's light, attempting to stabilize the tottering platform. Dozens of marine officers in their cloaks immediately responded, shouting in unison, Tekai. They formed a solid human wall in front of the execution platform, but as the destructive shockwave hit, several people in the front row instantly bled from their mouths and noses, flying backward. Just at this critical moment, a hearty laugh pierced through the roar of the explosion. Gurararara. Akainu brat. Your magma can't burn my friend. At the bow of the Moby Dick, Whitebeard Edward Newgate stood like a mountain. He gripped Murakumogiri tightly with both hands, and a white orb of tremor fruit power rapidly gathered on the blade. With a fierce shout, he swung his blade violently towards the empty space to the side of their clash. Crack. The atmosphere shattered like fragile glass. The invisible tremor precisely sliced into the boundary between the magma and the Haoshoku. Akainu's magma fist strike was forcefully deflected by 3 points. Boom. The giant magma fist grazed the execution platform and slammed into the empty ground on the left, splattering scorching magma and instantly melting a huge, bottomless pit. Whitebeard. Akainu's eyes were wide with fury, raging flames burning in his magma-like pupils. Are you going to collude with Kaido? I only do what needs to be done. Whitebeard struck his bisunto into the ground, sending out a ripple of tremors, his voice like a great bell. The Marines capturing children as bargaining chips, such despicable tactics, do they deserve to wear the cloak of justice? A hint of surprise flashed in Kaido's dragon eyes, then he burst into an even more unrestrained, wild laugh. You go ro. Whitebeard. I never thought you'd have a day where you'd help me out. Don't flatter yourself. Whitebeard retorted coldly, his silver crescent mustache fluttering in the sea breeze. I just can't stand someone pulling such dirty tricks on pirate territory. On the execution platform, Sengoku's veins bulged on his forehead. Garp. What are you waiting for? Stop them. Almost simultaneously. If you're going to smash the platform, count me in. Garp's voice boomed like thunder. He violently shattered the ice surface frozen by Aokiji, his figure rocketing into the heart of the battlefield like a cannonball amidst the splashing ice shards. His right fist transformed into a black lightning bolt, without any flashy lights, only pure, ultimate terrifying power. Bang! Garp's fist precisely struck the energy core where Kaido's Kanabo and Akainu's magma fist collided. The forceful intervention of this third power instantly shattered the already strained energy balance. Rumble. An even more cataclysmic explosion occurred. The shockwave generated by the clash of 3 world-class peak powers surged outwards in all directions like a tsunami. The execution platform's base trembled violently, dense spiderweb-like cracks appearing on its surface, and shattered stones flew like cannonballs. The harbor's sea surface was blasted by the impact into colossal waves, a seawall tens of meters high roaring as it crashed towards the shore. Hold steady, all of you hold steady. Sengoku roared sternly on the execution platform, his golden Buddha's light surging to its extreme, trying to stabilize the tilting platform. But the tremor beneath his feet made him unable to stand firm. Kizaru's figure, a golden stream of light, flashed back to the command post amidst the explosion's flames. Mr. Sakazuki Fighting 3 is quite scary. Do you need help? Shut up. Borsellino. Akainu's magma-transformed arm sizzled, hot magma dripping onto the ice surface, stirring up plumes of white smoke. What are the Shichibukai doing? Tell them to seal off the outer sea area. Not a single fly is allowed in. Aokiji Kuzan pressed his hands onto the ice surface, his voice low. Ice Age. The biting cold spread like a giant python, attempting to freeze the world-destroying giant waves. The seawater froze at a visible rate, forming an arc-shaped ice wall over 100 meters high. 3rd, 6th, 9th Fleets, line up. Vice Admiral Onagumo frantically issued orders through his amplified Den Den Mushi, target, Kaido. Saturation bombardment. Pacifista, full firepower. Another Vice Admiral followed the command, indiscriminate suppression. Don't let them get any closer to the execution platform. Hundreds of cannons roared simultaneously, a dense barrage covering the sky and shooting towards the center of the battlefield. Dozens of pacifista activated, their dense lasers forming a destructive net that descended. However, in front of the terrifying energy field formed by the clash of Kaido, Whitebeard, and Garp, all attacks seemed pale and powerless. Cannonballs were shattered into dust by the invisible force field in midair, and laser beams instantly dissipated upon hitting the overflowing Haoshoku Haki. Yugo Rororo. Interesting. So interesting. Kaido's dragon eyes burned with crazy battle intent, his massive body circling in the air. Put more effort into it. The Kanabo, carrying even more terrifying black and red lightning, was raised again. Whitebeard swung Murakumogiri horizontally, the tremor acting like a giant axe splitting space. Gurararara, it hasn't been this exhilarating in decades. Garp grinned, armament haki condensing on his fist to a pitch black. Sengoku, watch this. Today, I'm tearing down your rotten platform. Though their objectives differed, the three formed a strange understanding. At this moment, Kaido wanted to save his son, Whitebeard wanted answers, and Garp wanted to vent his anger. The aftershocks of each of their attacks precisely swept towards the execution platform's base. Report. C-section support column 70% damaged. Power system overheating. Turrets unable to operate normally. Battle reports came one after another, Sengoku's face turning from ashen to pale. More and more magma dripped from Akainu's lava-transformed arm. He slammed his hand on the communicator. Fleet Admiral Sengoku. If we don't use the dynamo rock now, it'll be too late. Too early. If the range control isn't good, it will affect. Sengoku's words were interrupted by an earth-shattering roar. Garp suddenly changed his move. He abruptly stepped back half a pace, his back arched, right fist pulled back, all his muscles tightening like steel cables. The compressed and condensed power in that fist distorted the surrounding air. Serious punch. Foundation collapse. The punch pressure was not aimed at Kaido or Whitebeard, but like a precision-guided missile, it bypassed their attack trajectories and struck the most crucial support point of the execution platform's base with absolute precision. Crack. A grating sound of metal and concrete tearing apart rang out. The several-meter-thick reinforced concrete and the sturdy steel support pillars within were pulverized like biscuits. The entire execution platform's base was blasted open with a huge, grotesque gap, as if struck by a giant god's hammer, exposing its intricate internal structure and pipe systems. Ga! RP. Sengoku's roar was laced with unprecedented fury. Kaido and Whitebeard reacted with lightning speed. Well done. A sharp glint flashed in Kaido's dragon eyes. His kanabo, wrapped in Haoshoku lightning, was swung with the momentum, smashing directly into that huge gap like a direct strike at a dragon's core. Strike while he's down, finish him off. Whitebeard's Murakumogiri slashed down without mercy. The power of vibration condensed into a giant blade aura, striking in the same direction. Rumble. A colossal sound, like the heavens falling and earth rending. The execution platform tilted at a visible speed, its base's steel bars groaning piercingly, as if kicked hard by a giant. The unprepared marine generals, executioners, and communicators on the platform screamed as they lost their balance, weapons and equipment scattering everywhere. Amidst this world-turning chaos, no one noticed that in the deep harbor's seabed mud, Several black spherical objects had their covers blown off by the shockwave, and their red indicators quietly lit up. The smoke of Marineford had not yet dissipated. Under the lead gray sky, this fortress, symbolizing the absolute justice of the Marine, had already been reduced to ruins. In the core area where the execution platform collapsed, the broken relief of the words, "Justice," was diagonally inserted into the charred rocks. The gilded coating was curled by the magma, much like the precarious dignity of the Marine at this moment. Seawater poured in from the harbor breach, swelling the soldiers, uniforms and broken cannon barrels. Turbid waves slapped the ground, smearing dark red blood foam into a blurry mess. Garp stood shirtless on a relatively flat rock, his bronze chest still stained with dust and dried blood from impel down. His gaze swept over the struggling figures in the ruins. Several Marine recruits were dragging their injured comrades towards the battleship to retreat. These scenes pricked his eyes like needles, causing his hands, which hung at his sides, to clench unconsciously, his knuckles turning white from the effort. Not far away, Whitebeard leaned on Murakumogiri, his massive body like a moving mountain in the ruins. His eyes scanned Garp's tense profile, then fell on the area in the distance that continuously flickered with dark red light, his Adam's apple subtly bobbing. This four emperors, who had lived for most of his life, knew this aura too well. It was Sakazuki's magma, the fanatically prejudiced, absolute justice, that could incinerate everything. Traitor! A furious roar suddenly tore through the battlefield's silence, like a clap of thunder exploding over the ruins. Akainu Sakazuki's figure burst out from behind a solidified magma rock. His military trousers were burnt to tatters, and on his exposed left arm, magma-like patterns pulsed wildly as if alive. With each step, the rocks beneath his feet were scorched black by the high temperature. Two Marine soldiers who tried to block him along the way couldn't dodge in time. The magma overflowing from his body splashed onto their arms, their uniforms instantly smoking, and their flesh sizzled. The soldiers screamed and fell to the ground, but they didn't even touch his clothes. In Akainu's eyes, there was only one target left on the battlefield at this moment. That traitor who ruined his justice, that monkey D. Garp who brought shame to the Marine. You destroyed the Marine's order. You destroyed absolute justice. Akainu stopped about 10 meters from Garp, his right arm suddenly swelling and transforming into a giant claw blade covered in viscous magma. A Nagami Gurin. A scorching heatwave rushed forward, making Garp's gray short hair on his forehead dance wildly backward. Even the Whitebeard pirate's crew in the distance subconsciously took half a step back, as if getting any closer would burn them to ashes. Garp slowly raised his head, the suppressed anger in his deep eyes erupting completely at this moment. Memories, like a breached flood, instantly overwhelmed his reason. The scorched earth of Eni's lobby was still before his eyes. When the buster call was launched, the cries of children were swallowed by explosions. Just before the execution platform collapsed, he saw Akainu, in order to eliminate hidden dangers, refusing to spare even the surrendered pirate minions, pouring magma directly over the temporary prisoner of war camp. These scenes churned in his mind, overlapping with Akainu's current fanaticism, forming a raging fury capable of incinerating reason. He had guarded justice his entire life, not to see someone use justice as a pretext to wantonly trample on lives. Sakazuki, Garp's voice was as deep as muffled thunder. He slowly raised his left arm, and armament haki, black as ink, instantly covered his entire arm. The haki was so condensed it seemed substantial, gleaming with a cold, hard luster in the sunlight, as if it were not flesh and blood, but forged from the hardest sea stone. You never understood that justice isn't maintained by burning and killing. Before he finished speaking, Akainu's magma claw, with the power to melt gold and break iron, had already struck. Before the claw tip even touched, Garp's chest skin already felt a stinging heat. The air was distorted by the magma, forming strange heatwave ripples. Whitebeard narrowed his eyes, his hand gripping Murakumogiri tightening slightly. Gurararara. Is this old man finally getting serious? He could feel the haki around Garp rapidly condensing. It wasn't just anger, it was a resolute determination born of a protective obsession. This former Marine hero was finally going to personally expose the Marine's hypocrisy. Akainu's magma claw slammed hard onto Garp's left arm. Bang! A dull collision echoed through the ruins. Magma was shaken and splattered in all directions, creating small pits in the ground. The rocks beneath Garp's feet couldn't bear the force, instantly cracking into 3 grooves half a meter deep. Gravel rolled down the grooves, falling into the seawater that had poured in below, stirring up small splashes. Akainu's pupils suddenly constricted. He could clearly feel that his Inagami Guren, unleashed with full power, had been forcefully blocked. That arm covered in armament haki was like an insurmountable bronze wall. No matter how he urged his magma power, he couldn't advance an inch further. How is that possible? Akainu's voice was hoarse with disbelief. Your armament haki, how can it be so strong? Garp didn't answer, merely slowly raised his head, his gaze sweeping past Akainu's shoulder to the broken wall not far away. That civilian mother was desperately shielding her child, her body trembling with fear. The muscles in his right arm began to bulge, and beneath his bronze skin, veins erupted like coiled, angry dragons. An aura even more terrifying than before began to emanate from him, making the surrounding air viscous. Do you think you're burning pirates? Garp's voice pierced through the scorching heatwave, each word like a red-hot branding iron, searing Akainu's heart. You're burning surrendered prisoners of war, civilians hiding behind broken walls, the Marines' last bottom line. Akainu was enraged by these words. He abruptly retracted his magma claw, and his entire upper body instantly melted into magma. Great eruption. I refuse to believe your armament haki can block my full power attack. Dark red magma erupted from him like a volcanic explosion, forming a giant magma sphere over 10 meters in diameter, pressing down on Garp. The rocks along the way were instantly baked into a glassy state, and white steam formed by evaporating seawater filled the battlefield, enveloping the entire Marineford in a strange heatwave. Garp took a deep breath, his chest rising and falling violently. He looked at the magma sphere before him, at Akainu's face distorted by fanaticism, and the last trace of hesitation in his mind vanished. He remembered the sparkling eyes of Luffy when he saved a drowning child in the East Blue years ago. He remembered Roger's gaze when he entrusted Ace to him before his death. They were all protecting something, not destroying. Sakazuki. Garp's voice pierced through the steam, clearly reaching Akainu's ears. This punch is for all the innocent people you burned to death. He pulled his right arm back sharply, and the air in front of his fist began to distort, forming a visible vacuum cone. Black and red Haoshoku lightning, like physical chains, tightly wrapped around his right arm, emitting crackling sounds. The surrounding marine soldiers were terrified, fleeing backward in panic. Kizaru put away his nonchalant expression and subconsciously took a few steps back, his eyes behind his brown sunglasses filled with solemnity. Foo. This is troublesome. Sakazuki really pissed off Senior Garp. The Whitebeard pirates' crew held their breath, looking at the old man standing like a god of war in the ruins, their eyes filled with awe. They had never seen anyone so calm in the face of Akainu's magma, nor had they ever seen such terrifying haki condensed. It wasn't the ferocity of a pirate, but a strong person's protection of life. Akainu's magma sphere was already close, the scorching heatwave almost burning Garp's skin. Just then, Garp moved. His right arm shot out like a cannonball, with a sound of tearing air, and slammed into the magma sphere. There were no flashy special effects, no earth-shattering roars, only pure, ultimate power condensed on his fist at this moment. Serious punch 70%. This punch was a comfort to the souls of Enies lobby. This punch was a protection for the people. This punch was the most direct judgment on distorted justice. The moment the fist collided with the magma sphere, the entire Marineford seemed to stand still. Time, solidified at this moment. Space, distorted at this moment. Sound, vanished at this moment. Everyone's gaze was focused on the core area enveloped by magma and haki. The next second. Boom. A muffled explosion that pierced the soul erupted, more terrifying than any previous collision. Akainu's magma sphere, like fragile glass, began to shatter inch by inch from its center. Dark red magma fragments splattered like a downpour, landing on the ground with a sizzling sound. Under the impact of this terrifying force, the magma material of Akainu's left arm and half of his chest instantly annihilated, leaving only the right side of his body barely maintaining its elemental form. He stared with disbelief, his remaining right arm flailing futilely, trying to condense magma again, but found that the magma power within him was as if drained, completely unable to be mobilized. That pure physical shockwave not only destroyed his magma but also suppressed his devil fruit ability, preventing him from even elementalizing. Impossible, my elementalization, how could it fail? Akainu's voice was hoarse with despair, and his body began to retreat uncontrollably. Garp didn't stop. He took a step forward, and the rocks beneath his feet exploded. He looked at Akainu's remaining body, without a trace of pity in his eyes, only a cold calm. Your so-called absolute justice is nothing but an excuse to satisfy your desire for slaughter. Garp's voice was like ice. Today, I will let you know that those who trample on life will ultimately be punished by the protectors of life. He raised his right fist again. This time, the fist was aimed at Akainu's remaining chest. Akainu looked at the approaching fist, his eyes filled with fear. He wanted to escape, but found his body unable to move, only able to watch as the fist, imbued with destructive power, grew larger before his eyes. No. I can't die, justice has not yet been realized. Before he could finish his words, Garp's fist had already slammed heavily into his chest. PFF'd. Magma splattered, and Akainu's body flew backward like a broken kite, crashing into a dilapidated cannon tower with a tremendous roar. The cannon tower instantly collapsed, burying his body under the rubble. A few seconds later, there was no movement from the rubble pile, only dark red magma fragments seeping through the cracks in the stones, gradually solidifying on the ground. The entire battlefield fell into absolute silence. Marine soldiers froze in place, their weapons clattering to the ground, their faces filled with disbelief. Their admiral, Sakazuki, who believed in absolute justice, was actually killed by Garp with one punch. The Whitebeard pirates' crew gaped, forgetting to breathe. They had never imagined that a marine admiral could be defeated so decisively, and by none other than the former marine hero. Garp slowly retracted his fist, the Haoshoku lightning on his right arm gradually dissipating. He looked at the rubble pile, the anger in his eyes slowly fading, leaving only a deep weariness. He felt no joy of victory, only the relief of having a heavy burden lifted. The twisted justice had finally been shattered by his own hands. Just then, hurried footsteps approached. Fleet Admiral Sengoku stumbled out of the ruins of the command tower, his golden Buddha light long gone, his face filled with despair. When he saw the rubble pile that buried Akainu, and Garp's fist still emitting white smoke, his body went limp, and he collapsed to the ground. Garp, you really killed him. Sengoku's voice carried an unprecedented helplessness. The Marine is completely finished. The Gorosei won't let you off, won't let the Marine off. Garp didn't look at him, but turned around, his gaze sweeping over the surviving figures in the ruins. Wounded soldiers, rescued civilians, the awestruck crew of the Whitebeard pirates. His voice softened, yet carried an undeniable firmness. Whether the Marine is finished or not, I don't know, but this kind of justice that tramples on human lives should have been finished long ago. Whitebeard, leaning on Murakumogiri, walked up to Garp and let out a hearty laugh. Garararara. Garp, you old man, you're still so ruthless. But, well done. Someone should have exposed the Marines' justice a long time ago. Today, you avenged me. Garp grinned, revealing a mouthful of white teeth. Old man, don't just stand there making snide remarks. Next, there's still trouble to deal with. His gaze swept over the ruins, looking at the vaguely visible Blackbeard pirates' flagship on the distant sea horizon, a sharp glint in his eyes. Akainu was dead, the Marine was defeated, but this war was far from over. Blackbeard Teach, the venomous snake hiding in the shadows, was the real threat. And he had to guard these ruins, guard the people around him, and guard this future that had been so hard-won and changed. The sea breeze of Marineford, carrying the scorching scent of gunpowder and magma, swirled above the ruins. In front of the pile of rubble burying Akainu, dark red fragments of magma gradually cooled, solidifying into ugly, charred black lumps, resembling the scars this war left on the land. The battlefield's silence did not last long, broken by chaotic footsteps and suppressed sobs. Several Marine medics, clutching first aid kits, stumbled toward their injured comrades. Their movements were rigid, their eyes still holding the terror of having witnessed Akainu's death in battle. Garp stood still, his right arm slowly dropping. The black smoke on his knuckles gradually dissipated, leaving only a few faint magma scorch marks. He lowered his head and looked at his palm, where the scorching sensation of shattering the magma still lingered. It was as if that 70% serious punch had not only shattered Akainu's elemental body but also the last bit of nostalgia he held for the old marine order. Garararara. That brat Sakazuki, until his death, never understood that justice isn't forged by fire. Whitebeard's laughter broke the silence. Leaning on Murakumogiri, his massive body swayed slightly as his eyes swept over the panicked marine soldiers. Garp, that punch of yours has rid the sea of a menace. Garp lifted his head, his gaze passing over Whitebeard's shoulder to the distant horizon, where the flagship, Jesus Burgess, flew the Blackbeard Jolly Roger. The skull on the sail looked particularly menacing beneath the lead gray sky. His observation haki instantly spread out, clearly sensing the malice surging on the ship. The greed of Blackbeard Teach, the bloodlust of Shilyu, the restlessness of Burgess. This group had come for the chaos at Marineford. Old man, don't celebrate too soon. Garp's voice dropped. He pointed at the approaching flagship. The real trouble has just arrived. Whitebeard followed his gaze, his previously relaxed brow instantly furrowing. His hand tightened around Murakumogiri, causing the blade to hum softly. Teach, that rat finally couldn't resist showing himself. Just then, a rough laugh came from the sea, carried by the wind across the entire battlefield. Ziahaha. Old man Garp, Pops Whitebeard, long time no see. Blackbeard Teach's figure appeared by the flagship's railing. He wore his signature black coat, his gap-toothed mouth stretched into a greedy smile. Behind him, Burgess carried a massive battle axe, Shilyu toyed with his raid sword, and Van Augur aimed his long rifle, his gaze cold, at Garp and Whitebeard in the center of the battlefield. That Sakazuki guy truly was useless. Blackbeard sneered, his eyes sweeping over the rubble pile burying Akainu. Claiming absolute justice, yet he couldn't even defeat a traitor and threw away his life for nothing. What a disgrace to the Marines. Sengoku abruptly climbed to his feet, the golden Buddha light condensing again in his palm. He pointed at Blackbeard, his voice hoarse with rage. Teach. How dare you take advantage of the chaos? This is Marine headquarters, not your playground. Marine headquarters. Blackbeard laughed even more wildly. The current Marine headquarters is just a pile of dilapidated ruins. Old man Sengoku, look at your soldiers, and look at the hero beside you. Oh wait, he's a traitor now. His gaze turned to Garp, his tone provocative. Old man Garp, you killed Akainu. The Marines definitely won't let you off. Why not cooperate with me? We can overthrow the world government together, and then this sea will be ours. Garp stared at Blackbeard, a cold hint of mockery flashing in his eyes. Cooperate. Are you worthy? He slightly raised his right hand, and the pitch-black armament haki once again covered his knuckles. You think I don't know what you're planning? Akainu is dead, and you want to take advantage and seize his magma fruit, right? The smile on Blackbeard's face froze for a moment, then returned to greed. As expected of old man Garp, you're smart. But so what? This sea is fundamentally about the survival of the fittest. Akainu's devil fruit can only truly be utilized in my hands. He paused, then looked at Whitebeard. Pops Whitebeard, you're old too. The Beasts Pirates and the Big Mom Pirates are eyeing your territory. Why not join forces with me? We take down Garp first, then split the new world. What do you say? Garararara. You brat, you certainly dare to dream. Whitebeard's laughter was filled with disdain. He violently swung Murakumogiri, the blade sliced through the air with a piercing sound. I've lived this long and never heard such a ridiculous proposition. You're too green if you think you can scheme against me. Shilyu suddenly stepped forward, his raid sword flashing a cold light. His voice was icy. Captain, stop wasting words on them. We can't beat Garp and Whitebeard teamed up right now. Let's just kill some Marines to satisfy ourselves. Before his voice faded, Shilyu vanished like a phantom, leaving only a black afterimage as he lunged straight for a Marine officer. His sword was covered in pitch-black armament haki, clearly intending a killing blow. Just as Shilyu's sword was about to strike, an invisible pressure suddenly erupted from Garp. Wong. Pure Conqueror's haki spread outwards from Garp like a tangible tsunami. The air instantly solidified, and even the waves on the sea surface paused for a moment. Shilyu's figure suddenly froze mid-air, as if gripped by an invisible giant hand, the malicious grin on his face instantly turning to horror. He could no longer hold the sword in his hand, it clattered to the ground. His body uncontrollably flew backward, smashing heavily into the railing of Blackbeard's flagship, spitting out a mouthful of blood. I warned you. Garp's voice was like ice, cutting through the roar of the Haoshoku and clearly reaching the ears of Blackbeard's crew. If your man moved, I would cripple him. Blackbeard's expression changed completely. He looked at Garp, revealing true apprehension for the first time. Conqueror's haki, it's this powerful. Burgess and Van Augur beside him were also pale. The shockwave of haki just now made it impossible for them to even stand steadily, let alone fight. Whitebeard watched the scene and grinned. Garararara. Garp, you old geezer, your haki is still terrifying. He also released his Haoshoku, intertwining it with Garp's haki to form an invisible barrier, protecting the pirates and injured soldiers at Marineford behind him. Teach, you saw it yourself. It's not so easy to make a move right under our noses. Sengoku stood in the ruins, watching the combined Conqueror's haki released by Garp and Whitebeard, his heart filled with mixed feelings. He had once thought that Garp's betrayal would lead the Marines to eternal fools, yet now, this very traitor was protecting everyone at Marineford. He took a deep breath, walked up to the Marine soldiers, and spoke with a slightly hoarse but exceptionally firm voice. Everyone listen up. Cease resistance and immediately organize the evacuation of the wounded. Destination: G1 branch. The soldiers froze for a moment, then reacted and began moving. They ignored Garp and Whitebeard, instead heading toward the warships docked in the harbor. Garp did not look back, only nodding slightly, his gaze still fixed on Blackbeard's flagship. Blackbeard watched the Marines begin to retreat, then looked at the mountain-like figures of Garp and Whitebeard, knowing that taking advantage of the situation today was no longer possible. He gritted his teeth and hurled threats at Garp and Whitebeard. Ziahaha. You're lucky today. But just wait, next time we meet, I'll show you what true power is. Having said that, he ordered the flagship to turn around and slowly sail away from Marineford. Burgess supported the injured Shiryu, glaring at Garp unwillingly, but daring not to say another word. Van Augur put away his long rifle, his eyes filled with apprehension. That blast of Haoshoku had completely crushed their morale. Watching Blackbeard's flagship gradually depart, Whitebeard sighed in relief and retracted his Conqueror's haki. Garararara. That rat sure runs fast. Garp also withdrew his haki. He watched the Marine soldiers escorting civilians onto the warships, a hint of satisfaction flashing in his eyes. At least these people are safe. Sengoku walked up to Garp, his expression complex. Garp, the Gorosei won't let this go. They will definitely send more people to hunt you down. You, be careful. Garp looked at Sengoku, a mocking smile playing on his lips. Don't worry, I haven't lived enough yet. As for you, when you go back, think carefully about what the Marines should truly protect. Sengoku fell silent. He looked down at the ruins beneath his feet, doubting absolute justice for the first time. Kizaru had been standing on the remnants of a distant turret the whole time, watching everything unfold, his eyes flickering uncertainly. He neither moved to help Akainu nor to stop Garp, he simply watched silently. Only when Blackbeard retreated did he slowly speak. Oh dear, that was quite spectacular. Sakazuki is dead, Teach ran away, and the Marines retreated. Now, the sea is going to get lively. Garp glanced at Kizaru but said nothing. He knew Kizaru always adhered to the principle of self-preservation, and would not easily get involved in dangerous conflicts. Whitebeard, leaning on Murakumogiri, walked up to Garp. Garp, where are you planning to go next? Will you come back to the New World with me? Garp shook his head, his gaze directed toward the distant horizon. There, the outline of a warship flying the Straw Hat Jolly Roger was faintly visible. It was the Sunny. A gentle smile appeared on his lips. I still have a group of brats to protect. They are still growing, and someone needs to watch over them so they don't stray. Whitebeard paused, then burst out laughing. Garararara. You old man, still so fond of protecting the younger generation. That's good. With you there, those brats will surely go further. He patted Garp's shoulder. If you ever need help, send someone to find me in the New World. My ship is always open for you. Garp nodded. All right. Watching Sengoku board the warship, Garp put away his documents and turned his gaze back toward the Sunny. He knew the road ahead would be harder, the Gorosei's pursuit, Blackbeard's covetousness, and the enemies hidden in the shadows would all become obstacles for him and the Straw Hat Pirates. But he was not afraid. He had weathered the storms of the Roger era, witnessed the downfall of rocks, and personally shattered twisted justice. Now, what he had to do was protect the people around him, watch those brats grow into independent great pirates, and watch this sea truly usher in the day of freedom. Garp took a deep breath, stepped forward, and walked toward the sunny. The smoke over Marineford had not yet dispersed when Blackbeard's Jesus Burgess disappeared below the horizon. Garp hung the empty flask on his waist and walked toward the sunny, his military boots stepping through the shallow waves. On the deck, Luffy's rubber neck stretched out long as he shouted, "Grandpa, we're leaving." Nami stood beside him, hands on her hips, rolling her eyes at Luffy. But just 50 meters out, his observation haki suddenly detected two presences that tightened his heart. One was Kaido's rampant dragon might, and the other was Yamato's weak presence, still locked in a sea stone cage next to the execution platform. In their frantic retreat, the Marine had forgotten this sacrifice. Half the cage rested on a broken wall, the other half hung above the shallows. The chains were embedded in Yamato's collarbones, she leaned against the bars, lacking even the strength to lift her head. Worse still, Kaido's presence was rushing toward the command tower, where Sengoku had just helped the injured Vice Admiral Onagumo behind a broken wall and hadn't yet managed to get onto a lifeboat. Garp immediately turned, his bare feet stepping over the rubble in the ruins as he charged toward the command tower. Before Garp could reach the cage, the sky was suddenly filled with the roar of dragon wings flapping. Kaido transformed into a huge azure dragon, 100 meters long with metallic scales, spiraling toward the Marineford command tower, shouting, "Urororo! The marine is empty. Today I'm tearing this fool place down." A dragon claw violently swung out, instantly shattering half of a remaining turret. Steel fragments flew everywhere, smashing against the broken wall and kicking up a cloud of dust. Sizzling dragon breath rolled in his throat, and dark red light leaked through his dragon teeth as he sprayed it toward the broken wall where Sengoku was. The dragon breath was thick and fierce, heading straight for Sengoku and Onagumo. The few scorched trees next to the broken wall were instantly reduced to black ash. Sengoku had just pushed Onagumo to safety when the heatwave from the dragon breath scorched his cloak. The golden Buddha light hastily condensed in his palm, but it seemed thin. Whitebeard's Moby Dick was anchored on the nearby sea surface, watching the scene unfold, but unable to do anything. Just as the dragon breath was about to hit the broken wall, the sharp sound of sails snapping taut suddenly echoed from the clouds. The red force suddenly appeared near the shore. Red Hair Shanks leapt from the ship's rail, gripping Griffin in his right hand, and his conqueror's haki instantly erupted, shouting, "Kaido! Stop right there!" The black and red Haoshoku acted like a physical barrier, colliding with Kaido's dragon might. The clouds in the sky were torn in half, and the sea surface churned up 3-meter-high waves, which crashed onto the shallows, splashing water all over the cage. Garp, who had just run up to the cage, had his trouser legs soaked by the waves. He looked up at Red Hair and muttered, "That Shanks kid, perfect timing." Kaido's dragon breath was deflected half a foot by the Haoshoku, smashing into the empty ground next to the broken wall and kicking up towering white smoke. His massive dragon body stopped midair. The dragon head moved closer to Red Hair, his golden eyes bloodshot. "Shanks, you're interfering again. Akainu is dead, no one can stop me." Red Hair neither dodged nor retreated, pointing Griffin toward the distant horizon. Blackbeard's flagship hadn't gone far at all. The skull flag atop the mast was faintly visible in the sunlight, anchored right on the edge of the battlefield. "Didn't you see Blackbeard watching the show nearby? What is your purpose for coming? Isn't it to save Yamato? Or do you want to smash the marine so Blackbeard can reap the benefits?" Kaido followed Red Hair's gaze and indeed saw Blackbeard's ship lingering. He stared at the ship, hesitation flashing in his dragon eyes. He could accept losing to the strong, but he absolutely refused to be used by Blackbeard. If he exhausted all his strength tearing down the command tower here, Blackbeard might launch a surprise attack from behind, and he could even lose his devil fruit then. Garp used this interval, his arm covered in pitch-black armament haki, and slammed it fiercely onto the sea stone lock core of the cage. With a clang, the lock core shattered, and the fragments fell into the shallows. He reached inside and supported Yamato's arm. She groaned in pain, her face pale. The chains on her collarbones were still bleeding, but she didn't cry out, only lifting her head to look in Kaido's direction. Kaido saw Yamato. His dragon eyes twitched, and he finally let out a cold snort. You're lucky this time. Next time we meet, I'll punch both you and Garp, you two old geezers, into the air. The massive dragon body circled once and flew toward the new world. Several beasts' pirates' warships followed closely, quickly becoming small dots on the skyline, leaving behind only a sky full of dust. Red Hair watched Kaido fly away, retracted his haoshoku, and lifted his chin toward Garp. Why did you come back? Weren't you almost at the sunny just now? Came back to save this girl, and that old geezer Sengoku. Garp pointed to Yamato, who was leaning against him, and glanced at Sengoku, who was standing up behind the broken wall. The marine forgot her during the retreat. I can't just leave her here to die. Yamato recovered slightly and whispered to Red Hair, thank you. Mr. Shanks. Don't thank me. If you must thank someone, thank your father for not going completely insane. Red Hair smiled and waved his hand, tossing a new flask down from the ship's rail. This is for you. Next time we meet, remember to return it full. I want East Blue rum. Garp caught the flask, twisted it open, and took a gulp. The spicy liquid suppressed the dryness in his throat. At that moment, Marco rowed the lifeboat ashore, blue flames swirling in his palm. Mr. Garp, Whitebeard Pops sent me to pick up Miss Yamato. We have medical personnel on the ship. Garp helped Yamato onto the lifeboat and instructed, heal well. Whether you want to find Kaido or go your own way, decide for yourself later. Yamato nodded. Marco rowed the boat toward the Moby Dick. Sengoku walked over and patted Garp's shoulder. This time, thank you. Thank me for what? I just didn't want to see you die in dragon breath. Garp hung the empty flask on his waist. You guys should retreat quickly. The Gorosei won't let this go easily. Sengoku nodded and turned to direct the remaining marine to the lifeboats. Whitebeard stood at the bow of the Moby Dick and shouted to Garp, Garararara. Garp, remember to have a drink next time we meet. We'll see. Garp waved his hand and walked toward the Sunny. Garp quickened his pace and reached the Sunny. Luffy's rubber arm immediately stretched out, nearly dragging him onto the ship. Grandpa, hurry up and come aboard. What's the rush? Garp slapped his hand away and jumped onto the deck. First, tighten the anchor chain. Kaido's waves just pushed the ship off course. Don't hit a reef. Nami handed him a sea chart. Mr. Garp, which island should we go to next for supplies? Find the nearest supply island, stock up on provisions, and then go to Fishman Island. Garp took the grilled meat Sanji handed him and took a big bite. Yamato is fine. Whitebeard will look after her, don't worry. Zoro leaned against the ship's rail, wiping his sword, and looked up to ask, will Kaido come again next time? Yes, but with me here next time, he won't have an easy time. Garp chewed the grilled meat and looked into the distance. The Moby Dick and the Red Force began adjusting their course. The ruins of Marineford gradually shrank, only the broken wall scorched by the dragon breath still stood in the sea breeze. Luffy suddenly jumped up, pointing toward the new world. Grandpa. Next time we meet Kaido, I'll be the one to punch him into the air. Garp smiled and ruffled his hair. Alright, but don't get roasted into jerky by his dragon breath then. Everyone on the deck laughed. The Sunny raised its anchor chain, its sails billowing in the wind, and sailed toward the nearest supply island. Waves slapped against the hull. Seagulls cried out in the distance. This chaotic war was finally over. Those who needed saving were saved, and the journey ahead had to continue toward the next stretch of sea. In Marineford's harbor, seawater mixed with gunpowder smoke and blood stained the overturned shipwrecks and shattered shorelines. The Sunny's anchor chain was slowly being raised, and the Straw Hat's attention was focused on Garp, who had just boarded the ship. However, in this brief interlude, an emergency meeting, deciding the fate of thousands, was being held in a tense atmosphere within the command room of the Marine flagship, the Osend. Smoke filled the air. Fleet Admiral Sengoku leaned his hands on the cracked tactical table, his gaze sweeping over the few remaining high-ranking officers. Vice Admiral Onagumo, bandaged and pale from blood loss, and Kizaru Borsellino, who leaned against the bulkhead, seemingly idly filing his nails, but with an incredibly grave look in his eyes. The reality is before us, no need for further words. Sengoku's voice was hoarse, tinged with deep fatigue. He heavily tapped his finger on Marineford's location on the sea chart. Sakazuki is dead, Kuzan is absent, leaving Borsellino as the only remaining top combatant of the headquarters. More than half of the Science Division's pacifista are destroyed. Casualties among officers below commander rank exceed 30%, and the number of seriously wounded is still increasing. We no longer have the ability to maintain the front line and continue fighting. Vice Admiral Onagumo slammed his fist on the armrest, coughing a few times as he aggravated his wound, and said unwillingly, Fleet Admiral. The G-1 branch's reserve forces and Vice Admiral Momonga's fleet are rushing here at full speed. We can still hold out for a while, relying on the remains of the fortress, and wait for reinforcements. It's too late, Onagumo. Sengoku interrupted him, his tone resolute. His finger moved to several red dots marked on the edge of the sea chart. Look at the last intelligence report from the reconnaissance unit. Blackbeard teaches fleet hasn't left at all. They're lurking on the outskirts of the battlefield, like hyenas waiting for their prey to weaken and fall. Waiting for G1's reinforcements now will only make them run head-on into the well-rested Blackbeard pirates, or get bitten by Kaido, who might return. That will lead to greater, needless casualties. We must make a decision immediately. Kizaru slowly put down his file, tilted his head, and drew out his words, but the content was cold and realistic. Oh dear. Vice Admiral Onagumo, face reality. Even a powerful fighter like Mr. Sakazuki was defeated. I alone can't handle Mr. Garp, Whitebeard, and that unstable Kaido all at once. Besides, Redhair and Blackbeard are watching from the side. Rather than letting the Marines' precious forces be consumed here for no value, it's better to preserve the seeds. After all, my salary isn't enough to pay such a high, overtime, fee. He appeared cynical, but he incisively pointed out the huge gap in the Marines' top combat power and the utter futility of continuing a death struggle. Just then, a frantic communications officer rushed into the command room. Report. Kaido. Kaido has not left. His fleet is still lingering in the nearby sea, their movements unknown. Blackbeard's fleet is also moving in sync. This news was the last straw. Sengoku took a deep breath, as if making a monumental decision, grabbed the megaphone Den Den Mushi from the table, and pressed the all-army channel. His voice, carried by the Den Den Mushi, spread to every corner of Marineford where Marines still remained, weary, yet with an undeniable resolve. All Marine units, attention. This is Fleet Admiral Sengoku. I am now issuing the highest order, abandon Marineford. All combat personnel, immediately cease all combat operations and retreat to the designated warships at the fastest speed. Prioritize escorting the seriously wounded onto the ships. Commanders of each unit are responsible for organizing the rear guard and destroying all confidential documents and important equipment that cannot be taken. Repeat, retreat immediately, no lingering in combat. Destination, G1 branch. The order, like a pardon, instantly ignited the last will to survive in the already collapsing Marine morale. Soldiers who had been barely holding on with sheer willpower immediately sprang into action. They abandoned unnecessary baggage, helped the wounded, and rushed to the large transport ships and warships that had not been completely destroyed, moving as fast as possible. Officers shouted themselves hoarse, trying to maintain basic order, but everyone's movements conveyed urgency, wanting only to escape this purgatory that had swallowed too many comrades. In the harbor, aboard the Moby Dick of the Whitebeard pirates, Whitebeard watched the Marines' hasty but orderly retreat and let out a low laugh. Garararara. Sengoku, have you finally made the most rational, yet most painful, choice? He did not order a pursuit. His goal was never to annihilate the Marine. Rescuing Ace and crushing the Marine's arrogance had already been achieved. Red-haired Shank's Red Force quietly anchored in the outer sea, like a silent witness and potential mediator, ensuring that this retreat would not escalate into a new chase. Near the execution platform ruins, Marco had already used the Phoenix's regenerating blue flames to initially stabilize Yamato's injuries and carefully remove the sea stone hook that had pierced her scapula. Several Whitebeard Pirates members were carefully placing her on a stretcher. Thanks, Marco. Garp stood by the Sunny's rail and shouted over. The reason he hadn't immediately left with the ship was subconsciously to ensure that Yamato, this variable, was properly settled, preventing Kaido from going berserk again because of his daughter, interfering with the Marines' retreat, and thus triggering a new chaotic battle. Seeing Marco handle it properly, he finally relaxed. On the bridge of the Osen flagship, Sengoku took a final look at this fortress that once symbolized the Marines' absolute justice. The remnants of the execution platform stood solitary in the sea breeze, and the area where Akainu had died was still scorched black, emitting wisps of smoke. His gaze complexly swept over the departing Sunny and the figure of his old comrade on board. The sea breeze billowed his fleet admiral's cloak behind him, the two large characters for justice appearing particularly glaring and heavy against the backdrop of the ruins. Garp, you fool, what kind of era do you intend to usher in? He muttered to himself, his voice so soft only he could hear it. Then, he resolutely turned, no longer looking back, and walked towards the command room. Osend, set sail. All forces, retreat. The Marine fleet completed its formation and, carrying its remnants and defeated, sailed away from the ruins of Marineford, heading towards the G1 branch. On the sea, only shattered islands, floating debris, and the end of an old era and the beginning of a new one full of unknowns remained. Garp watched the Marine fleet depart, completely relieved, and then truly turned his attention back to the Sunny. All right, brats, the trouble is temporarily resolved. Hoist the sails, set off. Next stop, Fishman Island. Oh. Luffy raised his arm, responding loudly. The Sunny officially set sail, departing from this battlefield that had just undergone an earth-shattering upheaval. The Sunny sailed quietly in the waters surrounding Marineford, gradually leaving the massive ruins and smoke behind. The sea breeze carried a salty, damp scent, attempting to disperse the lingering tension on the deck. The Straw Hat crew members were either sitting or standing, most bearing the exhaustion of having survived a disaster, yet their gazes were involuntarily fixed on Monkey D. Garp, who had just boarded and was standing in the center of the deck with his hands on his hips. The brief silence was broken by a loud shout full of dissatisfaction. Grandpa! Luffy suddenly jumped up, his rubber arm stretching out instantly, and his finger pointed unceremoniously towards the Marineford sky, which was already out of sight. Why didn't you let me go up there and punch Kaido away? He looked really strong. I could have beaten him. He pouted angrily, his straw hat tilted to one side, his face filled with the frustration of missing a great battle. In his simple mind, a strong opponent meant a mandatory challenge, and having his own elder steal the kill was more upsetting than losing the fight itself. Garp's reaction was simple, brutal, and highly effective. He didn't even wait for Luffy to finish speaking before his loving, iron fist accurately smashed down onto his grandson's head. Thump. With a dull thud, a visible lump instantly rose on Luffy's head, causing him to clutch his head and squat down, tears nearly spilling out. Brat. Garp stood with his hands on his hips, lecturing with a booming voice, all you know is fighting, fighting, fighting. Is Kaido someone you can take on right now? That's a matter for me, Whitebeard, and that red hair brat to handle. You don't need to stick your nose in. Luffy clutched the lump on his head and yelled defiantly, I'm strong. I'm not a kid anymore. Strong. Garp glared, his beard bristling. No matter how strong you are, you have to pick your moments. The situation this time was extremely complicated, and it's not something your rubber brain can figure out. He paused, looking at his grandson's aggrieved and unwilling expression. His tone softened slightly but remained firm. However, you listen up. Next time, when we get to Wano country, if you still have the guts, I'll let you personally punch that Kaido mudskipper away. How about that? Luffy's eyes instantly lit up, and all dissatisfaction and pain seemed to vanish in an instant. He jumped up suddenly and excitedly held out his pinky finger, really? You promise, pinky swear. Garp looked at his grandson's silly expression and rolled a massive, exasperated eye, but he still extended his rough finger and hooked it with Luffy's pinky. When have I ever lied to you? The prerequisite is that you survive until then, don't get killed by some small fry along the way. Hee, no way. Luffy immediately beamed, as if he could already see the scene of his great battle with Kaido in Wano country. Just then, Nami walked over anxiously and grabbed Garp's arm, her orange hair looking slightly disheveled from worry. Mr. Garp. This isn't the time to be talking about this. You killed an admiral. The world government will absolutely not let this go. Your bounty will surely skyrocket to a terrifying astronomical figure. Our entire ship will become the priority target for every marine and bounty hunter in the world. This is too dangerous. She could foresee the immense dangers that would fill their future voyage, a prospect far more terrifying to her than facing 4 emperors. Garp patted Nami's hand. His palm was broad and warm, carrying a reassuring strength. Little Nami, don't worry. His voice was steady and full of confidence. With this old man on the ship, I'd like to see who is foolish enough to touch a hair on your heads. If the celestial dragon's lackeys show up, I'll punch them away just the same. His words carried an undeniable dominance, as if the greatest trouble was nothing more than a single punch to him. Nami looked at his resolute gaze. Although the anxiety in her heart hadn't completely subsided, she had found a solid reliance and breathed a slight sigh of relief. Tch. Zoro, leaning against the railing and wiping his Wado Ikimonchi, suddenly uttered a sound, drawing everyone's attention. He looked up at Garp, his tone flat but carrying a trace of imperceptible approval. Old man, that punch you threw at Akainu just now was certainly not bad. There were no excessive compliments, but the weight of this simple assessment, coming from a swordsman who highly respected power and possessed great strength himself, was considerable. This was pure respect for the strength of a powerhouse. Hearing this, Garp grinned proudly and burst into laughter. Ha ha ha. Of course. I am Monkey D. Garp. Just then, Sanji walked onto the deck carrying a huge platter, and the tempting aroma of roasted meat instantly filled the air. Old man, you must be hungry after fighting for so long. Try the special roast I just made, replenish your strength. He gracefully presented the platter to Garp. Garp's eyes immediately lit up. He unceremoniously grabbed a large piece of meat and stuffed it into his mouth, chewing loudly and praising indistinctly, Delicious. Your cooking is really good, brat. Meat. Seeing this, Luffy instantly tossed all thoughts of Kaido and promises out of his mind. His rubber arm instantly stretched out and grabbed towards the platter. Grandpa. Save some for me. Brat. Daring to steal my meat. Garp protected the platter with one hand, while the other hand mercilessly delivered another punch to Luffy's outstretched head. Thump. Ouch. The grandfather and grandson immediately started chasing and wrestling on the deck over the roast meat, and the serious, tense atmosphere from moments ago instantly disappeared. Chopper, holding a box of rumble balls, watched dumbfounded from the side, muttering softly, wow, they have such a good relationship. Usopp, meanwhile, began proudly boasting to Frankie and Brook about how, heroically, he had supported everyone on the battlefield with his slingshot. Robin sat gracefully, a history book resting on her lap, a gentle smile playing on her lips, watching the noisy scene before her as if the earth-shattering battle just concluded was merely an insignificant interlude. Frankie shouted, Super Tilda. What a vibrant grandfather-grandson bond. While checking the Sunny for any damage sustained during the shockwaves. Brook elegantly took out his violin. Yo-ho-ho-ho Tilda, for such a heartwarming scene, why don't we play Bink's sake to celebrate? The deck of the Sunny was once again filled with the Straw Hat Pirates' unique, chaotic yet vibrant daily atmosphere. Garp's addition did not seem to change this fundamental nature, rather, he integrated into it in a peculiar way. Meanwhile, outside the ruins of Marineford, the surviving marine fleet was assembling. Fleet Admiral Sengoku stood on the bridge of the Osen ship, his face ashen, watching the last batch of wounded being carried onto the medical ships. His adjutant was reporting the preliminary casualty figures and equipment losses in a low voice nearby. Every number tightened Sengoku's brow further. Fleet Admiral Sengoku, a communications officer, quickly approached, saluted, and reported, Sentomaru, head of the science division, has called, asking for dispatch orders for the remaining pacifista. Furthermore, from Holy Land Mary Geois, the Gorosei have consecutively issued 3 orders demanding your immediate presence for a report concerning Garp, and the detailed circumstances of Admiral Akainu's death in the line of duty. The communications officer's voice grew quieter, clearly feeling immense pressure. Sengoku closed his eyes and took a deep breath of air, which carried the smell of the sea and burnt residue. He could imagine the wrath of the Gorosei, the fury of the world government high command, and the storm that was about to sweep across the world. Garp's betrayal and Akainu's death in battle were devastating blows to the authority of the world government. Reply to Sentomaru. The The Pacifista unit is to proceed immediately with the main force to the G1 branch for rest and maintenance. Sengoku's voice was weary but still maintained its authority. As for the Gorosei, tell them I need time to stabilize the situation, clear the battlefield, and comfort the wounded. I will provide a preliminary report via Den Den Mushi after arriving at the G1 branch. He had to buy some time. Not to shield Garp, but for the sake of the marine itself. He needed time to consider countermeasures, time to reorganize this army on the verge of collapse, and time to contemplate Garp's question, how exactly should justice be defined? He waved his hand, dismissing the adjutant and the communications officer. He stood alone on the bridge, gazing in the direction where the Sunny had disappeared, his expression complex. Garp, you scoundrel, what kind of future have you truly bet on that straw hat? The sea breeze blew past, lifting the tattered fleet admiral's coat on his back. The two characters for justice, under the setting sun's afterglow, seemed to be weeping blood. On the other side, the Sunny, filled with laughter, continued sailing toward an unknown future destined to be grand and turbulent. Garp's presence, like a giant rock thrown into a calm lake, was bound to stir up unprecedented storms on the sea. But at least for this moment, on this ship, there was a brief, precious warmth and clamor. The Sunny finished its surface journey, its hull completely enveloped in a translucent bubble film, and slowly began to sink, heading towards the essential route to the New World, Fishman Island, 10,000 meters below. The light on the deck was gradually filtered by the deep seawater, becoming dim and mysterious. The searchlights at the bottom of the ship turned on, and two bright beams of light pierced the darkness ahead, illuminating countless tiny creatures floating in the deep sea, like dust dancing in the night sky. Wow, it's so deep. Chopper, clinging to the coating with his tiny hooves gripping Garp's pants, looked out at the boundless darkness with both fear and curiosity. Mr. Garp, are there really sea kings that big in the deep sea? Much, much bigger than giants. Garp chuckled, rubbing Chopper's hat with his big hand. Of course, there are plenty of super-sized ones. But don't worry, they generally don't actively approach these glowing, big bubbles, and besides. He paused, clenching his fist, making a clicking sound. If they dare to cause trouble, it'll just add to our dinner. His words carried a reassuring dominance, and although Chopper was still a little scared, he visibly relaxed a lot. Yohahoho tilde this deep seabed truly has a unique charm. Brooke pulled out his violin from somewhere, tested the sound, and said, although I'm just bones, music can convey everything. Everyone, how about a rendition of Bink's Brew, to set us off on our deep-sea journey? The cheerful and familiar melody echoed on the deck, slightly dispelling the oppressive feeling brought by the deep sea. Usopp nervously checked the integrity of the coating, muttering, it must be fine. The coating agent made by my great Captain Usopp is a super reinforced version, probably. Frankie, meanwhile, was shouting, super tilde. All systems normal for deep dive. In the engine room, ensuring the ship's stable operation. Luffy, as usual, had no concept of potential danger, just excitedly pressed his face against the coating, eyes wide. Oh, look over there. Glowing fish. So cool. However, just as this deep dive seemed to be gradually settling into calm, Garp, who was standing at the bow, seemingly just admiring the deep-sea scenery, slowly closed his eyes. His powerful observation haki, tempered through countless battles and even capable of foreseeing parts of the future, spread out rapidly from the Sunny like an invisible, giant radar net, towards Fishman Island below. The obstruction and distance of the deep sea greatly weakened the clarity of his perception, but for a powerhouse of Garp's caliber, it was enough to capture some crucial fragments of information. What he perceived was not the beauty and tranquility Fishman Island should possess. Instead, it was a whirlpool of chaos, violence, and negative emotions. Large numbers of fishmen emitted abnormal, forcibly elevated energy fluctuations, filled with the illusory sensation of drugs and a violent aura. Undoubtedly, this was the effect of the evil drug S, and on a scale far beyond the usual. Countless faint presences were filled with fear, unease, and despair. These were the civilians of Fishman Island. An extremely radical ambition, full of hatred for humans and a craving for blood and destruction, was as clear as a lighthouse in the darkness, Hody Jones. And, a faint but resilient aura belonging to the Ryugu royal family, surrounded and suppressed by those violent presences. Garp suddenly opened his eyes, his brows slightly furrowed. Something's not right. His voice wasn't loud, but it was enough for the core members on deck to hear. Robin, standing not far from him, put down her book and calmly asked, Mr. Garp, what did you perceive? A rebellion is happening on Fishman Island. Garp said concisely, a large number of fishmen have taken a forbidden drug called evil drug, causing their strength to surge in a short time, and their emotions to become extremely violent. The leader should be that Fishman district punk named Hody Jones. His goal is to overthrow King Neptune's rule and establish an extremely xenophobic Fishman nation. Robin's slender eyebrows furrowed. Hody Jones. I've heard a little about him. He's a new generation of extremists that emerged from the Fishman district after Fisher Tiger and Jinbei left. I didn't expect his actions to be so swift and extreme. Using forbidden drugs, this means he doesn't care about the future of the participants, only about achieving his goals. Exactly. Garp nodded. That guy doesn't care about the future of the Fishman race at all, he's just venting his twisted hatred. Rebellion. A fight. Luffy's ears accurately caught the keywords, and he instantly bounced back from the coating, his eyes sparkling. Great. That Hody something, he's a bad guy, right? I'm gonna punch him flying. Garp reached out and pressed down on Luffy's excited head, stopping him from jumping around. Brat, listen up. The Fishman Island situation is essentially an internal conflict within the Fishman race. Their future should be chosen by the Fishmen themselves. As outsiders, especially humans, we absolutely cannot use force to make decisions for them. How would that be any different from the human invaders they hate? Luffy, with his head held down, tilted his head, a confused expression on his face. No fighting. But they're bad guys. Idiot. Garp pressed his head down a little harder. I didn't say you can't fight. What I mean is, your fists should be used to protect the right of the Fishman Island citizens to choose their own future. Punch those scoundrels who use violence, deception, and drugs to deprive others of their right to choose, like Hody Jones and his drug subordinates. Understand? Luffy blinked a few times. Although he didn't quite understand the big principles, he understood the last sentence. Oh. So, I can fiercely punch those bad guys who don't let others decide for themselves. Right. Right. That's it. Garp then let go, grinning. Teaching his grandson was most effective when it was this simple and direct. Sanji lit a cigarette, walked to the window, and looked down at Fishman Island, whose huge bubble outline was vaguely beginning to appear. His expression became serious. The beautiful ladies of the Mermaid Cafe, and Kami and Papig. I hope they're all okay. If those fools dare to harm the ladies, I will never forgive them. His killing intent flashed briefly in the blue smoke. Zoro, holding his sword, spoke indifferently, sounds like a lot of opponents, good for stretching my muscles. After the shock of the Marineford War, he yearned to test and improve himself through actual combat. Nami was more concerned with practical matters. Rebellion means the island is very chaotic. Will it be dangerous for us to go in so rashly? And the coating needs time to be reapplied, so we have to stay on Fishman Island. Don't worry. Garp crossed his arms, his tone full of confidence. Chaos has its advantages. You can take this opportunity to gain some experience. A drug-dependent waste like Hody Jones is no match for you. As for bigger trouble, he didn't finish, but his gaze said it all. He was there. Just then, Garp's observation haki stirred slightly again. He sensed an extremely powerful, yet deliberately suppressed, familiar aura also approaching Fishman Island, seemingly hidden in the shadows of a deeper trench. That red hair brat, he's really fast. Garp mumbled to himself, a barely perceptible smile playing on his lips. It seemed he wasn't the only one acting on the promise to jointly protect the new era. The sun continued to sink, and the surrounding deep-sea scenery became even more magnificent and bizarre. Giant glowing jellyfish slowly drifted by, like a moving starry sky, illuminating the nearby waters. Occasionally, massive sea kings would swim at the edge of the light beams, but they seemed to sense the chilling aura on the ship and wisely chose to stay away. Garp returned to the bow, gazing at the increasingly close, dreamlike island enveloped by a huge double-layered bubble, Fishman Island. His eyes were profound. In his memories from his previous life, the tragic rebellion on Fish Man Island instigated by Hody Jones, and the shadow later brought by Big Mom, would absolutely not be replayed in this life. He would be here, like an invisible trump card, guarding this ship and this island towards a future under the sun. But he wouldn't easily intervene. This was a trial for Luffy and the others, a promise to Red Hair, and even more, a trust in the new era he held in high hopes. Get ready, boys. Garp's voice reached everyone's ears. The bubble will soon pass through the membrane. Below, it's going to be very lively. Meanwhile, Marineford, Marine Headquarters, Temporary Command Center. Fleet Admiral Sengoku had just received a top-secret message, and his face was extremely grim. Has the news been confirmed? He asked the communications officer in front of him in a deep voice. Confirmed, Fleet Admiral Sir. The communications officer stood at attention and replied, the message was sent by a CP0 intelligence agent stationed on Fishman Island, at great risk to their life. Hody Jones of Fishman District and his new Fishman pirates have massively consumed the forbidden drug, Evil Drug S, taken control of Ryugu Palace, and placed King Neptune and his family under house arrest. The island is in chaos, and humans have become targets of attack. They seem to be planning to publicly execute King Neptune in Gyeongcord Plaza. Sengoku slammed his fist on the table. Having just suffered a disastrous defeat in the Marineford War, with the Shichibukai system virtually defunct and the world in turmoil, now such a heinous rebellion had occurred in Fishman Island, a world government-affiliated nation. Fleet Admiral, should we? A staff officer beside him whispered. Can we even send troops? Sengoku asked back wearily. Furthermore, Fishman Island is 10,000 meters underwater. Our large warships cannot effectively intervene. Are we to send a small number of elites to meddle in the internal strife of the Fishman race? That would only make things worse. Immediately report the full intelligence to Holy Land Mary Geois for the Gorosei to decide. He could almost guess how the Gorosei would decide, most likely to stand by and watch, perhaps even welcome it. A chaotic, non-human affiliated nation might better serve the interests of certain individuals. Sengoku walked to the window, looking at the bodies of marine soldiers being salvaged outside, a huge sense of powerlessness welling up in his heart. Justice seemed so pale and distant in the face of such a complex situation. He thought of Garp and the Straw Hat, who might be heading to Fish Man Island at this moment. Garp, what will you do this time, you rogue? Deep beneath the sea, the sunny finally touched the huge bubble membrane of Fishman Island. The ship trembled slightly and slowly merged into it. A chaotic and challenging new stage was about to begin. The outcome of the Marineford campaign, like a global tsunami, spread to every corner of the world at astonishing speed via news coup, Den Mushi, and various covert channels. Marineford suffered unprecedented devastation. The fortress was reduced to ruins, Admiral Akainu was killed in action, Hero Garp defected, and Fleet Admiral Sengoku was forced to retreat with the remaining forces. Every piece of news was enough to shake the sea. The world's reaction was swift and chaotic. On certain islands in the first half of the Grand Line, known as Paradise, where the Marine had previously maintained basic order, anarchy now reigned supreme. Pirates no longer hid their tracks, they openly celebrated in town taverns, mocked the Marines' crushing defeat, and aggressively fought over territory. Did you hear? Akainu is dead. That terrifying magma man. Ha ha ha. The Marine is finished. From now on, this sea belongs to us. Look. 5 billion berries. Monkey D. Garp. Good heavens, how much money is that? Steal. As long as we find an opportunity, we'll pull off a big job. Robberies, arson, and brawls frequently broke out everywhere. Residents of many small towns locked their doors and windows, praying that pirates wouldn't come knocking. The Den Mushi at various marine branches were ringing off the hook with distress calls, but the catastrophic defeat at Marineford had also demoralized the branch marines. They could only barely hold onto a few key strongholds, feeling powerless over the vast seas. Even Logatown, known as the town of beginning and end, was gripped by extreme tension. Smoker, stationed there, bit down on his cigar, his face terribly grim as he watched the noticeably increasing number of fierce-looking new faces on the streets. Tashigi. He growled. Here, Colonel Smoker. Tashigi immediately adjusted her glasses and ran over. Send more men on patrol, and tell all shops to close early. Suppress any disturbance immediately. Smoker exhaled a thick plume of smoke. Fool Garp, causing such massive chaos. The New World, a region already controlled by the Sea Emperors, had a more subtle reaction. Certain minor factions that had been affiliated with the Whitebeard pirates but had adopted a wait-and-see approach after the Marineford War began to stir, attempting to fill the power vacuum. Many more powerful pirate crews watched with cold detachment, some even with anticipation. The weakening of the Marine meant greater opportunities and fewer constraints. The entire world seemed to have entered a new edge of chaos because of the battle at Marineford. Holy Land Mary Geois, the room of authority. The Gorosei stood clustered in the center of the vast hall, the atmosphere terrifyingly oppressive. Several recent newspapers were scattered on the floor. The front pages featured photographs of Marineford's ruins and Garp's shocking bounty poster. Trash. Marcus Mars Saint, the warrior god of environment, slammed the first-generation Kidetsu he held onto the ground, producing a muffled clang. Sakazuki is trash. To possess such immense power and still be killed head-on by Garp. His so-called absolute justice is a joke. Shepherd Jew Peter Saint, the warrior god of agriculture, spoke in a low voice. The loss of an admiral is a fatal blow to the world government's authority. More importantly, Garp's defection sets an extremely bad precedent. He must be dealt with using the harshest measures to serve as a warning. Ethanburn v. Nujiro Saint, the warrior god of finance, pushed up his glasses. Sengoku's responsibility is undeniable. As fleet admiral, he failed to stop Garp, failed to reverse the defeat, and even made the decision to abandon Marineford. His competence is questionable. J. Garcia Satan Saint, the warrior god of science and defense, spoke with a cold voice. Now is not the time to hold Sengoku solely accountable. The immediate priority is stabilizing the situation. The Marine cannot fall into chaos, and the world government needs the Marine as its sword to maintain order. Topman Warkari Saint, the warrior god of justice, folded his arms, but the Marine truly has no one left to use right now. Aokiji's whereabouts are unknown, and Kizaru Borsellino, HMPH, his attitude has always been ambiguous. We need new power, a powerful force capable of truly shocking the sea. Just then, a guard outside reported, Fleet Admiral Sengoku requests an audience. The Gorosei exchanged glances. Let him enter. The large doors opened, and Sengoku walked in. He was still wearing his Fleet Admiral uniform, but the justice coat on his back seemed to have lost its former luster, and the fatigue and gravity in his expression were impossible to hide. He stopped and saluted the Gorosei. Sengoku. Peter Saint was the first to speak, his tone revealing neither pleasure nor anger. We are fully informed about the events at Marineford. Do you have anything to explain? Sengoku took a deep breath and addressed them directly without evasion. The failure of this campaign is entirely my responsibility. My command was insufficient. I failed to foresee Garp's defection and failed to prevent Akainu's death in battle. I underestimated Garp's resolve and strength, and I overestimated the Marine's ability to maintain control in the current situation. I, Sengoku the Buddha, am no longer fit to serve as Fleet Admiral, and I have come specifically to tender my resignation to you, my lords. He lowered his head and presented his Fleet Admiral hat with both hands. This was the most honorable way a defeated soldier could accept responsibility. Silence fell over the hall. Suddenly, Mars Saint let out a cold laugh. Resign. Sengoku, do you think resigning now will solve the problem? Will it restore the Marine's prestige? Will it make the pirates on the sea fear the world government again? Nujiro Saint coldly interjected. Resigning now is merely a coward's escape. Who do you intend to dump this mess on? Kizaru. Or Aokiji, whose whereabouts are unknown. Sengoku's body stiffened slightly, but he did not look up. Satan Saint tapped his cane on the floor, the sound echoing through the empty hall. Sengoku, the world government will naturally record your dereliction of duty. But now is not the time to pursue it. The Marine needs to be rebuilt, and order on the sea must be restored immediately. You must atone for your crimes by rendering meritorious service. Topman Warkari Saint stepped forward, staring at Sengoku. We need you to immediately stabilize the remaining Marine forces and regroup. At the same time, the world government will grant you unprecedented support. Sengoku finally looked up, a hint of confusion and incomprehension in his eyes. What do you mean, my lords? Peter Saint, speaking for the group, delivered the final decision. Your resignation is not approved. You must remain in the position of Fleet Admiral until a new order is established. Furthermore, the world government authorizes you to immediately launch the World Military Draft. The World Military Draft. Sengoku's pupils contracted. This was an extremely special and rare measure, meaning a widespread recruitment of strong individuals from all over the world to join the Marine, regardless of background or past, with the promise of exceptional promotion. That's right. Satan Saint added, not just ordinary personnel. We want you to use this draft to directly recruit top-tier powerhouses whose strength rivals or even surpasses the former admirals. Grant them appropriate ranks and authority. Funds and resources will be supplied limitlessly by the world government. We demand only one result. Restore the Marines' deterrence as quickly as possible and thoroughly suppress the chaos on these seas. Mars Saint's tone carried an undeniable command. Remember this, Sengoku. This is your last chance. And the Marines' last chance. Do not disappoint us again. Otherwise, the consequences will be something neither you nor the entire Marine can bear. Sengoku stood rooted to the spot, the fleet admiral had in his hands feeling as heavy as 1,000 pounds. He understood that this was not trust, but necessity. The Gorosei could not find a more suitable replacement, so they had to use his remaining prestige to execute this radical and risky plan. The world military draft might attract powerful individuals who uphold justice, but it could just as easily attract ambitious monsters. But at this moment, he had no choice. For the survival of the Marine, and to maintain world stability as much as possible, he had to accept this mission. He slowly put on the fleet admiral hat, straightened his back, and his eyes regained their sharpness, although deep within, fatigue still lingered. Understood, my lords. His voice was steady once more. The Marine shall regroup. Leaving the room of authority and walking down the vast, ornate corridors of Mary Geoise, Sengoku felt incredibly heavy-hearted. The world military draft, this was nothing short of a massive gamble. He took out a Den Mushi and connected to the Marine's current temporary command center. It's me, Sengoku. Fleet Admiral. Transmit my orders. First, issue a maximum alert to all Marine branches worldwide, secure key points, and avoid large-scale conflicts with pirates as much as possible to preserve strength. Second, activate emergency protocol, Dawn Project, and issue a worldwide draft notice, recruiting based solely on talent, regardless of identity or past. Third, notify the Science Division that Dr. Vegapunk's new weapon development priority is to be raised to the highest level. We need every possible source of power. Yes, Fleet Admiral. Hanging up the Den Mushi, Sengoku looked into the distance, toward the vast, boundless sea beneath the red line. He clenched his fist. No matter what the future held, he was still the Fleet Admiral now, and he had to fulfill his duty until the very last moment. The announcement of the world draft was like a giant stone thrown into a calm lake, stirring up enormous waves across the globe. Generous benefits, promises of exceptional promotion, and the slogan, protecting justice, attracted people from all walks of life to the various Marine recruitment centers. Fleet Admiral Sengoku was stationed at the temporary headquarters, the G1 branch base located at the entrance to the New World, which had now been elevated to the actual command center of the Marine. Every day, he had to deal with a massive volume of documents, from reports requesting aid flying in like snowflakes from various seas, to preliminary screening lists from the recruitment centers, leaving him utterly overwhelmed. Most applicants had mediocre strength and could only replenish the losses of low-level personnel, falling far short of the top-tier combat power he desperately needed to immediately turn the tide. Until this day. The aide almost sprinted into his office, his face alight with incredible excitement. Fleet Admiral Sengoku. Two extraordinary people have arrived. Sengoku looked up, his brows furrowed. Calm down, explain clearly. Yes. 2 powerhouses have been recommended from recruitment centers across the regions. One is a blind swordsman named Isho, who is said to have displayed terrifying power during the test. The other calls himself Aramaki. His ability is extremely bizarre and powerful. The examiners responsible for the test were completely wiped out without even touching his clothes. They likely possess strength comparable to an admiral. A sharp light instantly burst forth in Sengoku's eyes. This was the level of monster he had been waiting for. Arrange for them to see me immediately. Also, notify Admiral Borsellino to come over. Shortly after, inside the Fleet Admiral's office, Sengoku scrutinized the two people before him. The man on the left was tall and robust, wearing a temporary coat provided by the Marine. His eyes were closed, he held a cane sword, and his face showed signs of weathering, yet he possessed a mountain-like composure. He was Isho. The man on the right appeared more casual, chewing on a blade of grass. His hair was slightly disheveled, his eyes held a cynical wildness, and a faint smile played on his lips. He was Aramaki. Are you the two who displayed strength far surpassing ordinary people in the draft test? Sengoku asked in a deep voice. Isho bowed slightly, his tone peaceful. I merely possess some rudimentary skills. If I can use them to protect the weak and quell conflict, I am willing to contribute my humble strength. Aramaki chuckled, being more direct. I heard this place offers food and lodging, and I get to beat up pirates. Sounds interesting, so I came. You're the Fleet Admiral, right? When do I start working? Just then, the office door was pushed open, and Kizaru sauntered in slowly, hands in his pockets, his tone as drawn out as ever. Oh my, are these the two? They certainly look terrifying, Fleet Admiral Sengoku. What do you need me to do? Sengoku looked at Kizaru and said seriously, Borsellino, I need you to confirm their strength. The location is the dedicated training ground outside the base. I need to know if they truly possess the qualifications to bear the title of Admiral. Kizaru raised an eyebrow, his gaze sweeping over Isho and Aramaki, a cryptic smile spreading across his lips. Understood what a tough job this is tilde. The spacious training ground outside the base had been cleared and placed under martial law. Sengoku was present in person, and beside him stood two figures draped in white robes and wearing strange masks, CP0. They were the eyes of the world government, here to witness and evaluate this new power that was about to be brought forward. Kizaru stood at one end of the field, looking at the two men opposite him, and said unhurriedly, well gentlemen, who wants to go first? Or, you can both come at once to save time. Isho took a step forward, tapping his blind cane lightly on the ground. I shall go first and ask for guidance from Mr. Kizaru. Very well Before Kizaru finished speaking, his body instantly vanished, transforming into countless golden photons. The next moment, he appeared beside Isho, raised a finger, and a blinding laser beam erupted. Speed is weight have you ever been kicked at the speed of light? Oh, wait, this is a light speed finger . However, just as the laser was about to hit Isho, an incredibly heavy force suddenly descended upon the entire training ground. Boom! The ground suddenly caved downward, and the air became viscous like mercury. The laser Kizaru fired was noticeably deflected in this terrifying gravity field, grazing Isho's coat corner before shooting into the distant ground, kicking up a cloud of smoke. Kizaru's light form movement itself was greatly disrupted, and his figure paused slightly. Gravity, is it? What a troublesome ability . Kizaru's tone remained relaxed, but his eyes held a touch more seriousness. Isho slowly drew his cane sword. Although I cannot see with my eyes, I can perceive the world with my heart. Mr. Kizaru's light cannot travel in a straight line within a warped gravity field. He swung his sword forward and pressed down. Gravity blade, fierce tiger. The invisible gravity was compressed and shaped, turning into a roaring fierce tiger that crushed down toward Kizaru. Wherever it passed, the ground was forcibly plowed open into deep ravines. Kizaru's figure turned into photons again, attempting to evade, but he found that the surrounding space seemed to be restricted by gravity, greatly reducing his speed. Oh how terrifying he muttered, crossing his arms over his chest. Yasukani's sacred jewel. Countless dazzling light bullets poured out, colliding violently with the gravity tiger. Boom! Deafening explosions echoed throughout the base, and the intense shockwave even caused the distant CP0 members watching the fight to instinctively take half a step back. Amidst the billowing smoke, Isho stood motionless, while Kizaru hovered in midair, the golden light around him slightly dimmed. That is enough, Sengoku called out, stopping them. He had already seen what he wanted to see. Isho's ability was not only powerful but also possessed wide area control and destructive force, sufficient to fulfill the duties of an admiral. Kizaru dispersed his light, returned to the ground, and tilted his head to look at Isho. Fufufu tilde tilde Mr. Isho, please be gentle in the future tilde I almost got hit by you, that was close tilde. Isho sheathed his sword and bowed slightly. I yield, Mr. Kizaru. I have lost. He knew that the opponent had not used his full strength. At that moment, Aramaki walked forward impatiently. Hey, is it my turn yet? This is boring. Kizaru looked at him and smiled. Such an impatient young man tilde well then, I suppose I should be a little more serious this time tilde. This time, Kizaru launched the attack first. His body turned into a beam of light, moving at high speed, instantly appearing behind Aramaki, and sweeping out a fierce light speed kick. However, an astonishing scene occurred. Aramaki didn't even turn around. Countless incredibly tough dark green vines and massive flowers instantly sprouted from his back, arms, and even his entire body, forming a plant shield. Bang! Kizaru's light speed kick slammed hard into the plant shield, yet it only caused the vines to shake a few times and some petals to burst, failing to harm Aramaki's main body in the slightest. Kizaru uttered a sound of confusion, turning into photons again to create distance. Aramaki turned around, grinning to reveal pale white teeth. Done fighting. Then it's my turn. He slammed his hands onto the ground. In an instant, the ground of the entire training field violently churned. Countless extremely thick giant trees, spiked vines, and even carnivorous plants burst from the earth, growing wildly at an astonishing speed, instantly transforming most of the area into a deadly, primitive jungle. These plants seemed to possess life, actively wrapping around, lashing out at, and trying to devour Kizaru. Kizaru continuously flashed in the air, cutting the attacking plants with lasers, but the regeneration speed of the plants was terrifying. They grew back instantly after being severed, seemingly endless. Is that the Mori Mori no Mi? Or some even stranger ability tilde what an age for monsters to emerge tilde. While dodging the attacks, Kizaru still had time to sigh with emotion. He unleashed the Yasukani sacred jewel again, dense light bullets bombarding the plant jungle, causing a series of explosions that cleared a large section, but it was quickly filled again by newly grown plants. Sengoku watched the scene, already having reached a conclusion. Aramaki's ability was the embodiment of life force, possessing extremely strong defense, recovery, and area of effect attack capabilities, matching the standard required of an admiral. That is sufficient, Sengoku spoke again. Aramaki pouted, snapped his fingers, and the terrifying plant jungle quickly shrunk and withered like a phantom, finally vanishing, leaving behind only the scarred training ground as proof of what had just happened. Kizaru landed back on the ground, straightening his slightly disheveled yellow pinstripe suit. Oh dear, I'm exhausted tilde these young people today are stronger than the last tilde Fleet Admiral Sengoku, I think they're fine tilde. The two CP0 members exchanged glances and nodded slightly. One of them spoke to Sengoku in an emotionless voice. Combat strength assessment passed. The world government recognizes their qualifications. Sengoku took a deep breath, feeling a great weight finally lifted from his heart. He looked at Isho and Aramaki, stating gravely, in the name of the Marine Fleet Admiral, I officially grant you the Marine Admiral rank. Your codenames shall be, Fujitora, and Aramaki. Effective immediately. Soon after, news coups across the world took flight once more, and the latest newspapers and visual Den Den Mushi signals spread throughout the four seas. In the image, Fleet Admiral Sengoku stood in the center. Behind him, besides Kizaru, prominently stood two new faces draped in the Marine Admiral white coat, the composed, blind Fujitora Isho, and the wild-eyed, smiling Aramaki. Sengoku declared to the whole world, at this critical juncture for the Marine, to uphold justice and maintain order in the sea, through the world draft, we have specially promoted two powerhouses to join the Marine's highest combat strength. Effective immediately, the number of admirals at Marineford has increased to 4. In this new era, the Marine will adopt a stronger stance to sweep away all evil. Justice will never yield. The world was once again in an uproar. 4 Marine admirals. This was a structure never before seen in history. After suffering heavy losses, the Marine announced its return with an overwhelmingly powerful stance. After the announcement concluded, Sengoku immediately issued orders. Isho. I heed your command. You shall immediately lead a fleet to the Paradise Sea area to suppress the pirate groups wreaking havoc during the chaos. The primary goal is to restore order to the main shipping lanes and protect civilians. Understood. I will not fail you, Fujitora replied calmly. Aramaki. Hey, finally some work to do. Your mission is to wipe out the restless pirate forces at the beginning of the New World, especially the troublesome elements formerly under Whitebeard. Your methods can be tough, ensure you establish the Marines' deterrence. Understood. Leave it to me. I guarantee I'll make sure they get plenty of fertilizer. Aramaki licked his lips, a gleam of excited belligerence flashing in his eyes. Borsellino. Ah tilde how troublesome tilde. You will remain at the G1 branch, assist me in handling the headquarters reconstruction affairs, coordinate the overall situation, and stand ready to support the two of them at any time. Understood. Understood tilde tilde you certainly know how to put people to work, Fleet Admiral Sengoku tilde. Watching the two new admirals quickly depart after receiving their orders, and Kizaru's leisurely retreating figure, Sengoku walked to the window. Outside was the busy marine base and the vast ocean. New power had been injected, and the era of 4 admirals had begun. Thanks for watching.